All right. Welcome to Comic Book Radio. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti. This is episode 77. 77. How'd we get here so fast? Tonight, my guest is Gary. NERDROTIC. It's going to be a fun one. And Gary was on time. He was actually early. It's just we were catching up for a few minutes, and it was good times, talking about how fun this show's going to be. So don't blame me. We're not late because of that. We're late because we were having a fun time talking backstage. Before we get started, Rachel, I want to give a shout out to all you guys. There's a bunch of you in here, but I want to try to give a shout out, so I'm going to fly through. We got Rachel, Sketchosaur Rex, Johnny, what's up, John? We got Seer of All Is Obvious, Evil Dead, Conspiracies and Comics, Jetto Jaga, Kino Reviews, how's it going? Game Genie, what's up? We got Ruisu. Jake Blues, how's it going? Jory, I hope I'm pronouncing that well. And Gary was not late. Some Guy, 209. We also have Matthew here. What's up, Matthew? Tim, what's up, Cole King? Lady Ribbit, Grape, Nuka Cola. We got Tim M here as well. Micra in the house. Hollywood, how's it going? Micra again. Citizen Ronan. We also have Brian Suddenly Old, Mike TV Dub. Man, oh man, thank you guys so much for being here today. TRA Denver, hey, how's it going? Yogi Love is here. We also got Randy in the house. D. Barry. Man, oh man, thank you guys. Joe Dog. X-Gal is here. Let's see, who else is here? We got Death Metal Hero. What's up, Luke? Paula in the house. Zepp is here. So is Keir Covington, the man, the myth, the legend. King Cryptid number 4 and number 9 artist. Look at that guy right there. So good. Keir's the best. D. Barry, we got Biff Bam Boom Comics. GJ Martinez is here. Nicole J. Holy smokes, all you guys are here. Categorical. Yeah. Okay. Bob Reed. That's easier. Jimmy. What's up, Jimmy? And we got Lynn here as well. Good. Okay, I'm glad I could just fly through that. If I missed anybody, please forgive me. Without further ado, I have to bring on the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. NERDROTIC.
Hello. I don't know about legend. I don't know about a myth. A myth is my past that I can barely remember because of my drug-addled brain. But thank you for having me on, Peter Cimetti, the great Peter Cimetti. It has been way too long since we talked. It's been years.
Oh, God. Years. It's been the before time.
In the before time.
In the long ago.
The long ago, before COVID. Yes.
Good grief. And the thing is, at the same time where it's been years, it feels like, because of everything being so scrambly, it feels like it was like a week ago.
Yeah. I mean, last time we talked, I was in San Francisco. So it's been a bit of a journey.
Yeah. Holy smokes.
Bit of a journey, but it ended at a good place, unlike the mainstream American comic book industry, unfortunately.
Man, oh man. So we talked around like 2019, and so many things have happened since then across every single scale of everything. Too many things happening, I think, too soon. And it's in some ways it's a bit weird and scary. In other ways, it's a bit exciting. And some of these things that are happening too fast, too soon, they're going to have very long-lasting ramifications on the whole world. But I'm not going to get into some of those right now. We'll have plenty of time for that conversation tonight. But I want to give a shout-out. We have, I can't ever see it on StreamYard, so I have it over here. Spicer McLeroy, thank you so much for gifting 10 memberships to people in the chat tonight. Holy smokes, brother. So I want to talk to you about all things comic, all things of what you've been up to, and also touch a little bit upon the origin of how you got into comics and the paranormal, and I want to dive deep into the paranormal tonight too, because I'm loving what you're doing with Forbidden Frontiers, and I'm digging it, and I'm all about it. I've always been there for that stuff, so to see more people getting into this as well, it just makes my little crazy conspiracy theory paranormal dude heart skip multiple beats. So, and that's not anything to do with the jab or nothing. I'm good. So as far as things go with you, I guess let's start in the beginning. All right.
Okay.
So let's go all the way back. So when you get into the mindset, if you can, of the first time you discovered comic books and you fell in love with them.
Oh, this was in the 70s. Long time ago. So I grew up watching, hanging out at my grandma's house when my parents were working. This is when I'm 2 or 3 or 4. My earliest memories are kicking it in front of my grandma's TV, watching Batman, Adam West Batman, George Reeves Superman. And then PBS would run the Electric Company, and there was this guy named Spidey on there, and they do the Spidey super stories, and it would teach you how to read. He'd put up thought bubbles. So I really liked his costume. And I saw that he was in a comic book. I'll never forget, I bought my first comic book at a 7-Eleven on Rancho Santa Fe Road in San Marcos, California. 7-Eleven's still there, but they don't have a comic book rack, of course. And I bought Marvel Team Up 42, which was Amazing Spider-Man and Vision. They were in the 1500s, fighting I'm blanking on his name now, an evil pilgrim guy. And it was... That's the first time. So the first heroes I saw were in Marvel were Spider-Man, Vision, and Scarlet Witch, and they later fought like Doctor Doom, and it was I believe it was John Byrne who did that. But I fell in love. I couldn't read the comic at the time, but I learned to read on these comic books. And this was back in the day when my friends would have comic books, and we'd trade. So we'd buy our little stack of comic books, and when we were done reading them, we'd trade our comic books like we'd trade baseball cards. And I got Guardians of the Galaxy back in the day, fell in love with them, and never understood why nobody liked them. And the series just kind of went away. Became a big Avengers fan. And I was also getting into those 70s Batman books at the time. So I just dived in head first. And this is before there was comic shops. But eventually we got a couple because San Diego's a military town. So there was a comic shop downtown, and there was one in Oceanside, which wasn't far. I lived in North County, San Diego. And I went to Professor X's Comics, but right next door was the Coronet newsstand. So I'd make my mom take me there once a week. And, Death of Captain Marvel, bought it off the shelf. I mean, these are vivid memories. Daredevil, the whole Frank Miller one. We had my friend at school, my friend Peter Chen, came up to me. He's like, "You gotta read this Daredevil." I'm like, "Daredevil? The blind red? That's stupid." And he's all, "No, it's the greatest thing I've ever read." And I read it, and it was the greatest thing I ever read. And then, of course, right around that time, we had Claremont and Cockrum, and then Byrne and Claremont on X-Men, and Wolverine was just starting to get popular. It's like, oh, there's this character like Wolverine. He's got healing powers. He's awesome. He's Canadian, and he's short, And
He's got knives in his hands, man.
He's got knives in his hands. It was a great time to be a comic fan in like the late 70s, early 80s. We were just in this like Renaissance era. And it was hard for us to get back issues. And we'd longingly look at them on the wall. And, I'll never forget, my mom wouldn't buy me a Fantastic Four #1 that was $100.
Oh man, that's like the Amazing Fantasy 15 I saw for $250 at the shop.
Yep. So I made sure to remind my mom that, I got it, but this is how much I had to pay for it. Hope you feel bad. No, it was I fell in love with comic books. They spoke to me. It was just the perfect. It's just everything I love in a medium. I love the art. I thought it was, that back then art was dynamic. The covers were dynamic. And when I'd go on road trips, there'd be these little grab bags, right? The Charlton ones, the DC ones, and we'd be at truck stops. I'd grab them. I spent a couple summers in South Dakota working on a farm, and the drugstore there had all the strip cover books. So they were rolled up. So I'd, for 50 cents, I'd get a roll of like 5 comic books, just random. Just burned through all my money that summer just reading comic books at the drugstore when I wasn't working on a farm. Yes, I worked on a farm. It was really hard. And that kind of set my course as being a nerd. I was unabashedly a comic book fan. This is back in the days where, when you got a little older, you had to hide it, hide being a nerd. but Star Wars came out, which is kind of like our Beatles for Generation X. It set the course of my life. Like, this is something I love. I didn't know I never had like dreams like, oh, I want to be a writer or artist. I like drawing. I definitely, I draw, but I never thought I'd make it. I just loved reading them. I loved being a fan. And then I discovered these things like cons, and I can talk to other people about it. And it's just, it was something that hooked me at a very young age, and I never gave it up. Well, I gave up buying new comic books, Marvel and DC, about 2.5, 3 years ago. Just,
oh, wow.
I was done.
You're far more, well, I guess you have to stay a little bit more up to speed with it, but I tapped out around maybe 2005, 2006 with that, and then like slowly,
probably
eventually, yeah, maybe like one or two here or there, and then like 2010 to 12, it was like, I think I bought the last one I ever bought, and that was that. And but before then, it was like consistently getting maybe 5 to 10 books a month, and yeah, but yeah, that's all she wrote. But so with you, as far as, and I wonder if it mirrors my story at all, in terms of getting into the paranormal, the unknown, things that are, sci-fi mysterious, and things that are allegedly sci-fi or metaphysical, and we find out they really aren't. When did you get into that stuff?
In Search Of. In Search Of is what got me into that. It's a show that ran in the 70s. It was a syndicated show. Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
So I was into it because of Spock was, but it's something, again, I'd see at my parents' house or my grandma's house, and it would just be like Amelia Earhart, Bigfoot, UFOs, and that's another thing. I was just immediately hooked. Plus, there was a huge UFO craze in the 70s. It goes through peaks and valleys, but there was a massive UFO craze in the 70s. Close Encounters came out.
Yep.
But that's what got me into it. And I was really young when I read Charles Berlitz's The Bermuda Triangle. I think I was like 12 or 13 when I read that. Which is basically, it covers the Bermuda Triangle, but it covers a lot of stuff. But that was my gateway into the paranormal, was In Search Of, and Charles Berlitz's books. And then, of course, Erich von Däniken with Chariots of the Gods right after that.
Oh man, that's just like you're hitting all the the iconic stuff right there. It's a good time for it too. Holy smokes. Yeah, it is very similar to me. That's interesting. In Search Of, for me, I discovered after, because I was born in '84. So I discovered that stuff after I got into a show called Sightings in the 90s. Remember Sightings?
I remember Sightings. I do. I remember being pissed when it got canceled and replaced by the X-Files.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Did you know that was executive produced by the Fonz?
Henry Winkler produced that?
The Henry. I thought it was like just some dude who had, because you know how like Christopher Lloyd is also a producer's name? Yeah. It's the Henry Winkler.
No way. Sightings was great. I wish we had a show like that now. We still don't have a place that really is a good aggregate of UFO footage. I mean, it's like spread out everywhere. I'd like a good centralized. It used to be Secure Team 10. He doesn't make videos as much anymore, though.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, too, with a show like Sightings, because I'll still watch it to this day and go through it. And it's like you're seeing all the people, much younger. Like David Childress and Nick Pope and Jim Mars.
Oh, I know. They're all little babies.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's great.
Childress is, David Hatcher Childress is a cool dude. Nick Pope, I just saw him at Contact in the Desert. I was always kind of unsure about the guy because he came from the government. But after I watched his talk just a few months ago, I'm sold on the guy. Like he had a based talk. He's very, even though he's from the government, he's very anti-government, which is, I think, a very good thing, to be honest with you. But,
interesting, yeah, because I've always had the same reservations about him, but I'm like, okay, I'll listen. I'll give it a shot.
If I can find a way, I'm supposed to burn them for Anna Krigler. I have all of the talks. I bought them all. I can burn it for you and get it to you because it's really good. Like
Oh,
he
man,
gets into
please
some
do.
crazy shit, and it was the best talk of the weekend by far.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that, man.
Stuff. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. It's usually just the F bombs that we want to try to avoid, because even I'll let an S bomb fly every now and then. We try not to go crazy with it, but that's about it. Like I said before, and I said this yesterday on the show too, we want to offend people with what we say, not how we say it.
Exactly. I like that.
Yeah. So make it palatable. You know, if they run away in disgust, it's because of the topic we're talking about, and you know we're bringing up something that causes some kind of cognitive dissonance, and it's difficult to deal with sometimes. But yeah, I don't want to get into any vulgarities and getting people to go, I can't listen to this. So anyway, back to the comic stuff. So for you, rumor has it you owned a comic shop.
Yes. Where that meme comes from is I have to repeat it a lot because here on YouTube, you have to repeat things. You just do because there's new people coming in all the time.
Yep.
But yes, I owned a comic shop for 10 years in San Francisco. I bought it like basically on a whim. I didn't know how to run a business or anything. I had just moved up there, just gotten remarried. And I was at my job, which I was okay with. It wasn't the greatest job in the world, but I was fine with it. And I was sitting there at lunch and I was reading the newspaper, you know, that paper thing that used to be the internet.
Yeah,
and there was an ad in there to buy
heard
some
of that.
comic books. So I'm like, hey, you know, there's like 5,000 comic books for sale at a low rate. I'm going to go look at them to see if I can buy them. I'll put them in storage for my plan was to buy a store when I retired. My wife's like, why wait till you retire? Why don't you just start one now? I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to start one. Maybe, you know, if I buy an existing one, maybe. And it turns out that the person I was buying the comics from knew the store owner that I shopped at, and he was selling a shop. I just didn't know it when I was going to the store. So I talked to the owner. We threw around some prices and made a handshake deal over a pizza dinner. Pineapple pizza, by the way. That's what I had. And
It's California, you know.
damn right. And all of a sudden, I had to go buy a book called Business Business Owning for Dummies or something like that, and had to figure out how to run a comic book business. And I've never, I bought comics forever. I've been the best customer. Give me one of everything Spider-Man, that kind of customer that they loved.
It was easier back then.
It was. It was a lot easier when I bought the store. Like it wasn't this like super busy store. It was kind of fledgling, and that made it easier to build up. Though, to be honest with you, if it was super busy, I probably would have just lost my mind. But it was pretty quiet, so it gave me time to kind of build things up, and it was nice to have like an established customers. There was a base of customers there that I could build on. So it was good to have a stock for one, and he kind of walked me through it. A couple other comic shop owners helped me at first. I used to be friends with Brian Hibbs. That's right.
Is this in like the Berenstein Bears universe? With the E instead of the A?
Maybe. No, we used to get along pretty well.
Wow, time was.
Yeah, and James Sim from Isotope Comics was really helpful to me, and I have no problems with that dude to this day. He's a cool dude. I got it going, and over the 10 years, I built it up to where we won Best of the Bay in 2009, and the store was absolutely crazy busy, but it kind of led to my downfall, my relapse and my downfall. But the business itself, I had great customers, dude. I miss my customers to this day, but it was tons of fun. Comics were pretty good back then, no complaints. And the movies were just starting up, so it was a really exciting time to be a nerd. This is before America had to stick up its butt, so you could joke about things, and we were just having a good time. And then this is all before the dark times, and I got out like, I didn't mean to get out, by the way. I had to get out. It was because I relapsed and had to sell the shop because my life was falling apart. But it turns out that was a good time to get out, 2013.
It was, yeah. The universe was looking out for you in some weird way.
In some very strange way, yes. But I enjoyed the hell out of it, went to a ton of cons, met a ton of people, had artists come by, and it was the experience of a lifetime. And I kind of, I loved it so much I wanted to get back into it. That was the whole plan. Even when I sold it, and I started this NERDROTIC as just a podcast, I was like, well, I'm just going to do this for fun, and then we'll make it part of the comic shop when I eventually get another one. Little did I know this thing would kind of take off. So that kind of put those plans out a little more. Maybe if I buy another shop, I would definitely not sell new comics from the big two for sure. That was just out of the question. I probably wouldn't want to deal with any distributors.
So what, like back issues and indies?
Back issues and indies.
That would be awesome.
That's what I'd do. And I think it'd be just fine. Back issues do pretty well, and I know I've got a pretty good collection of back issues that I could just fill the store with and start from there. It'd be fun.
I know a couple shops over here in the area where it's if you want something new, you got to put on your pull list. They're not ordering anything new anymore. They're tired of it. And
good for them.
Yeah. They got back issues. They're doing better with that. And then, of course, they're doing really well with manga and gaming.
Yeah. Oh, manga's killing right now. Oh, my God. I even like a manga right now. So I fell in love with One Piece, the show. So I'm reading it now. It's freaking magnificent. Love it. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I saw maybe I should give it a shot. I saw the anime and I was like, I don't know. I can't get into this.
Try the live action. Yeah, because it took the live action for me to get into it. It is damn near the perfect show.
Wow. Okay.
Focuses on characters.
All right.
It builds a world around characters that's utterly ridiculous, but it works.
I'm going to write you an angry, stern, handwritten letter if it's not good and I don't like it.
I want it with a stamp on it, though. You mail it to my house with the stamp. I want to feel it behind you.
Yeah.
I want to feel your anger.
Speaking of crazy things, right? And this is completely off tangent. I'm noticing lately, and I don't know if anyone else is, and this is like an old man rant right here. Okay, this is like 60 minutes Andy rant type of thing. In tissue boxes, I'm not getting as many tissues as I should. I'm noticing that. I'm running through a tissue box, and it's like 50, and I did it one day. I pulled them all out, right? 50 tissues in a box that should be over 100.
So was that because of COVID? Maybe there really was a toilet paper shortage. Well, it could be paper shortage. It could be there are supply chain issues to this very day. So, hey, remember when we couldn't get supplies for a couple of months?
Yeah.
Comic book supplies?
Yeah.
So maybe it's the tissue paper's paper.
Right, and they're. It seems to me like they're counting the plies. I counted them. I cracked up because we were we ran through because we have a tissue box in every room. Yep. And within a week, they were gone. And I'm like, we're not using like 30 tissues a day. Like 3 or 4, And this wasn't like the height of allergy season. We weren't sick, nothing. Right? And I'm going in there, and I'm like, you know what? I'm this new box, I'm opening it, and I'm counting one tissue at a time. And I did that, and it was like 50. It was almost exactly what it was if they were measuring out plies as opposed to complete tissues.
Well, then obviously they're ripping everybody off. Those bastards.
They really are. And I don't know where this leads. I don't know, but I'm just putting it out there.
It's a tissue conspiracy. Yeah. Well, that's why you get a toilet paper roll and just use it as tissue. That's what I do. So, because I can see that toilet paper roll. All right. I'm not going to trust their number count.
Exactly. And I don't know, you guys maybe count up your own tissue boxes. Let me know your findings.
Yeah, everybody count your tissue boxes. Get back to us.
Yes, very important. Dr. Mask, thank you so much for the super chat. It says, Hail Pete and Gary. A few years back, I knew I wasn't enjoying comics anymore, and it wasn't until I watched NERDROTIC I figured out why. I've been new mainstream comic free since. And thank you. Wow, look at that.
You're not missing anything. You're saving a ton of money. They're relaunching Ultimate Spider-Man again. It's like you are just scraping the bottom of the barrel at this point. They have nothing to offer. I think Hickman's doing it or something. It's like, so boring. I mean, it would just be better for them to go back to basics. Mark Millar was talking about this. I was talking to him about it. He wants to just like get your core characters back to basics, get top tier talent to come in, but that would require them to spend money, which I don't think they're going to do. I think they're going to start outsourcing this stuff real soon.
It's funny too because if you look at the merchandising departments, right, all the merch they put out for the most part is classic, iconic representations of the characters. But they believe in these, whatever characters so much, don't they?
Oh, well, that's where we all started seeing like something's not right here. It's back in the day when a character didn't work, the book got canceled, they got thrown into a team or forgotten about, and maybe they gave it another shot years down the road. Now it's Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel gets canceled, relaunch it within a couple of months with another number one, and it's like, where does this even make sense? So it really felt like a decision from on high because nobody likes people liked Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, Miss Marvel as part of a team. Yeah, they gave her a solo book that went for a little while, but it never sold very well. It was very mid, right? And
which is honestly though not that bad considering today's numbers.
Considering today's numbers,
look back, oh man, it's interesting.
But let's be real, they sold for the covers mostly. Okay, that's when the hot covers or the Mayhew covers and stuff. That was fine, but it's clear now that it's just it's going to be a loss leader. Marvel became a loss leader, and we're just going to continue printing Kamala Khan and all this other garbage, which I would hate to say. God, it would drive me crazy to sell this. All my sympathy out there for the comic shop owners, whatever ones are left. I mean, we don't even know what the number was. It was around 3,000 when I had a comic store, like 3,000, 3,200.
That's about right, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if there's that many left, and if that includes online.
In 2020, when we got out of Diamond and we had left in April 2020, my numbers were around 2,100 for shops. So, yeah.
Damn. So yeah, we saw what they were going against the trends. Trends come from the ground up; they don't come from the top down. So all of a sudden they started forcing this. We're trying to force characters on you. We're forcing agenda on you. And that was the radical shift. It's not like, listen, we know artists were always left-leaning. And that never was a problem before. Occasionally you get some little... It used to be balanced out, by the way. You get some libertarian stuff in comic books, too. But, it was balanced. It was fine.
Oh yeah, and I mean honestly, you look back, the majority of it was, even if they leaned a certain way, it was just a lean. It wasn't like a massive pull to either side,
I mean, to say things like, and then the arguments against us, well, they were always woke, like racism's bad. It's like, who's for racism? That's a morality issue. That's not a political one, and these were supposed to be morality tales. And, when you bring in less talented people, they have to rely on gimmicks and tricks to make themselves have any kind of value. So, or they manipulate. I'm a gay, BIPOC, whatever, which makes you essentially unfireable unless things just get dire in these corporations. And they let this activist wolf in the door. And a lot of people were just going along with it because they were afraid of cancel culture. And now it's a cancer in your industry that you can never get rid of. And
can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Nope. So now the modern American superhero comic book industry, particularly DC and Marvel, and now Image too, can't cultivate talent. And the most important thing is they've lost generations, not just a generation, generations of new readers that they could have brought in. And the argument I heard back in the day 20 years ago when I was mentioning we're losing young people is, well, they don't read, they play video games. Well, they're reading the hell out of manga. So they still read. They read the hell out of YA. That's just a bunch of BS.
It's the craziest argument of they're just not reading.
Bull. So I made a concerted effort in San Francisco to be the family normie superhero store, because everybody in San Francisco was like, we're the alternative underground. That's the nature of San Francisco, right? And I'm like, nope, I'm going to be the like Marvel and DC store. That's what I'm going to be. And I'm not going to, I carried some independent books, but nothing that would be considered pornographic, nothing that was, I even the Avatar Press stuff that I thought was kind of torture porn. I stayed away from that. And I made a kids section, which didn't exist in any comic store in San Francisco. I made a legit kids section, but I didn't put the modern kids books that were dumbed down because they're made by dumb adults. You don't need to dumb things down for kids. The books I read weren't dumbed down. So what I did was I bought, it was a huge collection of the Bronze Age reprints, X-Men Classic, World's Greatest Comics, which are the Marvel Tales. I got just bunch, and I put those in a rack, and I made them cover price for kids only. You had to be 12 under. You can get that. So 25 cents.
Wow, man. Wow.
And it worked. We had I had a school across the street. We had kids over. We did birthday parties. We did all kinds of stuff to get like kids reading comic books again. And the teachers were cool. Everybody was supportive of it. I just made sure to curate it, so I was making sure they were getting age-appropriate stuff. But it was mostly Bronze Age, so it was all age-appropriate. That's the stuff I read, and it wasn't dumbed down. It was good books. So they were reading, freaking Stanley, Jack Kirby. They're reading all the stuff I read as a kid, and that got them into it, and it worked. But nobody else was doing that, and the industry was so worried. Each shop was so worried about self-preservation and ease because so many shop owners had never done anything other than own a comic book shop. We had to fight those guys, right? So there's a bunch of us who had done other things and jumped into this industry and went, this doesn't seem right. This one distributor thing seems bad. It seems like we're not growing. I understood what.
I'm going to interrupt you, and I hate that I have to because you're
can't.
doing great. But it is amazing to me the parallels right now, what you're talking about, because you're talking about this microcosm of a level of what is kind of led to a bad thing within the comic industry, centralization towards this type of stuff, right? And we're seeing this kind of thing play out right now in the world.
Yeah, like even when I was working at an auto dealership for Acura, so I would buy my parts from Honda. We still went to third-party sources to get our cars fixed because we need to get the cars fixed. We couldn't wait for Honda all the time, and they didn't give us the best prices all the time.
Exactly.
So we would ask the customer, "Hey, do you mind a third-party part?" They say no. We buy it. Even though we were affiliated with Honda. Now we had no choice. Outside of Baker and Taylor with trades, but that would, you had to buy a certain amount. It wasn't bad, but like with floppies, we were screwed. We had to use Diamond, and Dave Hawksworth, God rest his soul, was a great rep. I loved that man. He passed away a few years ago. Was the one guy that got along with Diamond, but he would show up at my store, and I thought for the longest time, oh, this is my rep. This is where I can bitch and get some improvements made. No, he was just there to sell me shit. He was just there to sell, stuff. And and I'm all, Dave, I see the book every day. I don't need to be upsold on stuff. I need to talk to you about like what's going on, my shipping, the quality of my books and the quality of books we were getting from Marvel and DC wasn't all Diamond's fault, by the way.
No, yeah.
Got worse and worse over time to where we'd pull books out of a box and the cover's still wet from the printer. Like it's literally, so I don't know if it's from the printer or from shipping or whatever, but it's wet. And we're like, what the heck is, like, this is crazy. But a lot of the times it'd be just like tough, or you got to wait. And we were on such a time schedule, and Diamond was so arrogant because they were the only game in town. They didn't need to try,
And that's literally the same thing that occurs as anything goes more monopolistic. Mm-hmm. Right. And you're talking about what we're seeing nowadays where people are like, yeah, but isn't it more convenient? Isn't it more convenient? Right. And then all of a sudden the convenience turns into there's no competition. There's no other choice. There's no alternative. There's nothing. And there's nothing to keep anyone else honest. Right. So all of a sudden you have the one thing. That's it. So you traded every other thing imaginable for a little convenience.
Mm-hmm. And it made things ultimately tough, especially when we all knew someday Diamond would go down. Like the giant corporations that own Marvel and DC would go, why would we deal with them? And when Steve Jeppy went on, I forgot whose live stream it was, and said that Diamond was, I'll never forget this, during COVID, he said Diamond was solvent, and then talked about his line of credit. And it's like, that doesn't mean you're that doesn't mean you have money. It means you have access to somebody else's money, but you don't have money. So you just went on a live stream and admitted you don't have money. And we found out they didn't have a lot of money, right? So that's why, it eventually fell apart. And, maybe it's easier for the comic shops now, but I think it's probably harder because they have nothing to sell that's new. So you're not going to be bringing... So you're basically becoming manga stores now that sell back issues, which is, not, I guess, not a bad deal if you're into manga. But, all the good artists are leaving. All the good talent is leaving on their own, as they should, because the people worth their salt will go make money on their own. So you have the Chuck Dixons of the world and the Graham Nolans out killing it right now. Mark Millar is like the one guy who's still like within the industry, but kind of doing his own thing. And is the only thing driving that I see.
He seems like he needs like one good reason. That's what he seems like.
Well, we had him on the show and I was blown away. He's like, "Oh, I'm on the board for Netflix." I'm like, "What?" So part of them buying Millar World is like he's got a seat on the board. I don't know how much power he has, but I was like, "Oh, that's wow, crazy." But he kind of is doing his own thing. But when you talk to Mark, he like comics are his first love still. Like, even though he's trying to get Netflix shows done, comics are his first love. And we don't see that from the creators we do see that from have gone on their own. Chuck Dixon's been writing comics forever, and he still loves it. That's really cool. I think that's really cool. Yeah. We needed just 1,000 more Chuck Dixons out there.
Oh, yeah.
But, I still, like, there's still a hunger for comic books. That's the thing. It's like, I went to Comic-Con. There was no Hollywood there this year, and it was great. It was just comic focused.
That's all I've heard from everybody. Yeah.
Yep. Artist Alley was packed. Artists were making more money than they had ever made, just on commissions and prints and stuff. Independent books, like usually go to Artist Alley to be kind of quiet. Man, that was probably the most crowded place in there, right? And the dealers were doing well with their back issues. And I was impressed. I'm like, hey, this actually gives me hope that there's still people who love this stuff. We just need to find a way to get it to the right hands, and they are. We got Eric doing his thing, we got you doing your thing, and it's going to be more niche. That's where it belongs. Comic books need to be niche. They can't be these million sellers anymore. But you can make a pretty dang good living if you cultivate. It's kind of like having a comic shop. I had a customer base of maybe a few hundred people, a few hundred people.
Well, the thing is, storytelling in general works best when it's counterculture and anti-establishment.
Yes.
Always.
And not when they print Avengers comics that promote the jab, which is disgusting. So that's you're right. And I think if, each artist can either team up or go and use YouTube or whatever, Instagram, whatever you can use to cultivate, an audience and a customer base that believes in you and likes your stuff. That's the future. So it's going to be a little bit more than just sitting in your room by yourself writing a comic book and drawing it. You're going to have to be your own salesman too, which is harder. But you're going to cut out the comic shops. You're going to cut out all these middlemen, and that way, I think it was Todd McFarlane. He gave up Spider-Man, gave up, at the time, a lot of money to go make more money with his own thing. So to understand that is like, well, there's the idea of making more money with Marvel, but after taxes, and it's only for a little while, you're basically a contract worker. He went over and did his own thing. And now, the guy's a multimillionaire because he bet on himself. So you don't need to be, it's like with my YouTube channel. I don't need to be a multimillionaire. I'm really, really happy with what I'm doing being a thousandaire. So, I'm not beholden to sponsors. The only thing I'm beholden to is YouTube's weird guidelines. But other than that, I got no boss.
Are you on Rumble at all?
I am on Rumble.
How do you like it there? I'm considering also building up on there,
I think
too.
it's a good alternative. I think it's a very good alternative. I think it's the best alternative right now.
Okay.
I especially after what had just happened to me. So I pissed off some actress in my last video, and she tried to take my video down and got it successfully taken down for like 3 hours, which pissed me off. But I got it back up. It was a bogus claim, and it didn't work. So I'm happy about that. But that, I mean, that's the risk you run, but that rarely happens to me. So, but Rumble, very good. They've been very nice to us. I mirror Friday Night Tights over there, and occasionally I'll put a video up. I haven't gone full bore yet though, but I'm usually very hesitant. I like to let a platform be around a couple of years before I even consider it. But
yeah,
Rumble reached out to me and was nice.
I'm the same way with practically everything. I'm like that guy that gets into the last season of a show because I'm like, is it really that good though? Is it?
Yeah, it's good to be cautious.
And then it's like, I'm into it and I'm catching up and I'm like, oh man, this is great. And then it's like, it's the last season and I'm like, why did it get canceled?
Yep. I did that with Buffy. I didn't get to Buffy until the very end. But
okay.
No, with Rumble, and by the way, they offered me no money. I just did it. I mirror FNT over there for nothing because I'm just trying them out. So, and again, I don't like. I've had strings attached. I worked for a living for a long time for bosses. Didn't have a problem with it. Worked my way up, and I just don't ever want bosses again. I don't want strings attached again. And there's no amount of money that will ever have. I would just hate to have that over my head. Have that kind of responsibility. That's why. I mean, the two sponsors I do have. I mean, it's just supporting basically people who supported us. It's not. They would never, ever tell me what to say or do.
That's old school stuff, though, that way, and it's better that way. Because you're not even if you were to have a corporate sponsor, you're not even just having them anymore. They don't even have them as a boss anymore. They got like a boss above a boss above a, and then whoever's on top of that, they don't even know who that is. It's controlling all the money and the investments and everything else. And so there's so many layers to it that turn it into this nightmare scenario. I have a couple questions, but I want to get to Travis's super chat first. I don't think this is going to be possible tonight, but he says, Gary, I heard from the grapevine that you can play guitar. Can you play a tune?
I can play the bass. I can't play guitar.
There you go.
I crushed my hand when I was a young man, and I have little to no feeling in my pinky and my ring finger. My left hand kind of moves like Ben Grimm's hand. So I crushed it and never got it fixed. It's a sad story.
Thank you, Travis.
Someday I'll maybe on like a Christmas live stream I'll play some bass.
There you go. What kind of music are you into that you like playing?
Metal, punk. Metal and punk. I'm a thrasher. I was always into the I grew up listening to soundtracks and being a nerd. And my older sister had an almost famous moment. She came in one day. She got tired of hearing the Empire Strikes Back soundtrack for the 50th time. She threw a stack of records on my bed. She's all, listen to all these, right? And it was Oingo Boingo, The Police, Journey. I didn't like Journey very much. Judas Priest, British Steel, and I automatically fell in love. So, but I don't know how fun it would be listening to a solo bass. It's fun playing, but ask my wife how much she likes listening to it. So,
could you do slap bass at all? That stuff is fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Get a little Seinfeld going.
Oh, I throw a little wah pedal on it. Get a little funky.
Nice.
Yeah.
Digging it. Nice, man. All right, so back to a question I had. Now, I've been having this conversation with a couple creators this week, and it's been a week where my cup runneth over. It started with Razor Fist, and I've had a lot of great people on the show, and now it's concluding with you. It's amazing.
Cheers.
Now, when it comes to this, I've brought this up in conversation, and we've all been wondering why. You remember the Epic imprint at Marvel?
Yes.
With Shooter, right?
Yep.
A creator-owned line, pretty great in terms of a lot of different things that came out of it, and also how creators were treated as well. Do you know the story of how that fell apart? Because it seems like it just fell apart right before Image was started, and I wonder if that was a catalyst for those guys, especially for McFarlane.
I think it might have been. I mean, the only things I remember hearing was the sales weren't what they liked. I don't know if that's a good enough reason. It felt like, I remember when it came out, I was interested in the stuff. I was always like kind of looking for, I love superheroes, but I liked when they did things different. I mean, Conan's one of my favorite comic books of all time. So, but yeah, the only thing I don't remember, I didn't hear exactly how it fell apart. I just assumed and heard it was just lack of sales. But they probably didn't want to pay the creators either. That probably had something to do with it.
Because Marvel's owners, I know, at that point in time, were not too keen about that line.
No.
But yeah, I'm wondering if that had something big to do with it. But it seems like it just missed what could have been Image never being formed.
It did, but Image had the rock stars, right? That's when like artists were like these young, cool kids, and with even Rob Liefeld, who wasn't the best artist at all, but him showing up on that Levi's commercial was a Levi's commercial, right?
Was it Lee's or
I
Levi?
think it was Levi. It was a jeans commercial.
It was a jeans commercial.
But him, like a comic book artist, being on a commercial was like unheard of. Like we would jump, like if somebody would like randomly mention Spider-Man in a TV show, we'd jump up. Like that's like they were never mentioned. They were never talked about. They were looked at as kids things, and we knew they were cool. We've always known they were cool. It was Levi 501s. Thank you. Was it Button Fly? The Button Fly 501s. I remember those. So yeah, I think Epic just didn't have the rock stars that Image had, right? Jim Lee, Silvestri, McFarlane, Liefeld, and it was just the right time. But they probably, like, Image took a but that usually happens, right? You'll have one thing take off, but there was always something that was a precursor to it that was pretty much the same idea that just missed, and somebody just hit the timing right on it. You know?
Yeah.
But Image ultimately,
like
became
passing in the night.
A disappointment, like they've had a couple of, early on it was great, but then the artists couldn't keep up with the monthly schedule. And, but we got those early Image books were fucking awesome. Excuse, God dang it. I did it. Sorry.
You get one F-bomb per show. So there you go.
Pitt, Max, Spawn. Sorry, folks. I loved these books. I love the Max. Sam Keith's The Max was one of my favorite comic books. And Dale Keown's The Pit was just unbelievable, and his work on Hulk was unbelievable too. I was completely into Image and bought in on all of it, but it just ultimately became a disappointment because they couldn't follow through. That's the tough part of this business is you can get something started, but you keep it going. Now they reinvented themselves and became this indie thing. And they brought in Kirkman, and Image sales when I was selling, right, mid 2000s on, were pretty good. Like Image was starting to like compete. Like I wasn't the biggest fan of I call it Saga, but Saga sold like crazy.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting there, it sold despite me going, Abortion Town. What the hell? Like there was weird stuff in it.
Yeah,
but people loved it.
I never got into that.
People loved it.
I tried.
Anything Mark Millar, I would push. I'm a big Mark Millar fanboy. Have been since Jump Street. But when his Millar World stuff started coming out, back in the early days when it was Top Cow and it was Wanted, when I was able to push a book, dude, like Top Cat, like that, like Image was really good in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, and again they lost their way when things went ultimately woke, and they had a propensity to be more woke than even Marvel and DC. If you've read some of their books were pretty freaking woke, and those are the ones I didn't read. I'd get like halfway through and went, nah, you know, and that was back then. But it was also a fun time. Like, you know, I remember when I liked Mark Waid. I liked his writing.
Oh, yeah,
and I liked Mark Waid, you know.
Yeah.
And
although I have to wonder, looking back, how much those editors played a part in
they
making
had to.
sure. Because you look at the editors on a lot of that stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, they were good, top notch.
They
then
were.
You look at the editors later on, and you're like, they look like they're just yes men that are like, yes, whatever you want to do. Yep.
Well, look, why hasn't Mark Waid written a script? Why haven't they recruited? I mean, he's written some classic comic books, okay? Like books that I liked quite a bit. But there was a time where he just, and it was right around with the Richard Meyer stuff, but it was also, I think, you know, behind the scenes, he didn't have the best reputation. Like, I remember meeting him at Comic-Con, and I'm like, this guy's kind of a sociopath. He was like yelling at people on the floor at Comic-Con. He was being really strange.
Wow.
So like I just assume everybody's high. That's just my assumption. As a sober guy, I'm like, oh, they're high. I thought the guy was high, but I think he's just got some mental problems. Whatever. But man,
like a maybe power trip kind of a thing.
I think so. And plus I think his upbringing, like he was some kind of, I can't, maybe I'm wrong on this one, but I think I remember hearing that like he was really smart, so he kind of motored through school early, and might have had the intellect, but not the social development, the social skills.
Oh, okay.
You know, so he might be lacking in that. Whatever the reason, you know, like the famous cross-gen incident. I remember hearing about that at the shop where he punched the wall.
Oh, yeah.
CrossGen was great, by the way. I loved CrossGen. I wanted it to succeed more than anybody. I was selling the crap out of those books. But yeah, Image lost its way again. And I think it's just all, what, is Kirkman still there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's got his own imprint now. They're doing that I'm not keeping up with it, but the Transformers thing, yeah. Right.
Kirkman, I always felt was like Walking Dead. Invincible's probably his best work. I think it's better than Walking Dead, but I still think he's like kind of overrated as a writer. I think there's like
it's such a curve now, you know.
Yeah.
Because there's books and creators from like the 80s that were like C-list that would be like big time A-list today.
Oh, I know. I
just like solid, entertaining content.
Fill-in artists or writers from the 70s and 80s would be top tier. You're right.
Oh, yeah. Just telling, you know, making stories, circles around everybody.
Roger Stern. There's probably a bunch of people who don't even know who the guy is.
Oh, Roger Stern.
Freaking legend.
Yes.
Absolute legend. Wrote some of the best stuff ever. You know, I'm sure people have heard of Marv Wolfman and, you know, like absolute legend. That guy's a legit legend. But like Roger Stern is a name like old comic book fans will know it, but new ones like who? It's like, oh, dude.
Yeah, didn't he play shortstop for the 87 Mets?
Yeah, right. Roy Thomas. Roy Thomas is the man. Roy Thomas is the man. Love that guy.
Yeah. Roy the boy.
Yep.
Man, oh, man. Thank you so much, Scott. Christy Jones is Mask. Now, that was a proper comic. There you go.
Dark Horse Mask. I love the Mask.
Yeah.
Or is that the other Mask?
Or is maybe Mask in terms of, I'm familiar more with
was that
the cartoon.
acronym? Okay.
Was that the same thing? I wonder.
Think so.
But I don't know. I gotta check.
I think that's an acronym right there. The Mask wasn't an acronym.
Yeah, Bob Gable goes, what happened to Jim Lee? Is he just a figurehead? I think, man, corporate structure right now is a very strange thing among those bigger companies. And,
yeah. I've been critical of him, but I think he's just a nice guy who's not cut out for corporate structure and corporate politics. I just think that's the case.
Yeah. I'd like to see Jim Lee just retire and do, like, YouTube stuff. just draw on things and be like, yes, I'm drawing this today. Hey, everybody. It just seems like that's more where life is telling him, just do that. Just do that. You don't need the corporate stuff.
No.
They only got you there so you don't become a competitor. And that's it. I think maybe he'd get more fulfillment out of it, but hey, I don't know. I don't know the guy personally or anything like that, but yeah. So a lot of people want us to get into the paranormal stuff, and I want to get into that too. All right. So before we do that, we're almost at the 1 hour mark. We'll go at least another hour. We might need a little more than that. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to show a trailer, and then that'll be that. 1 minute. You're watching Comic Book Radio. This is episode 77. My guest tonight is NERDROTIC. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti. We're going to be back in just a minute. Do not go anywhere. Welcome back. So, the paranormal. I want to do a deep dive, big time into that with you.
Sure.
And it's a subject that's near and dear to me. I'm finally getting around to getting back to being a comic creator again, not just a publisher, but I'm writing and lettering an ongoing series called King Cryptid. Pull a little Superman right there, and got the first 4 issues out. And it's an episodic series with complete stories in every issue, but an overarching continuity.
That's nice.
Old school style stuff. Thought balloons are in it, Gary. Thought balloons.
Yes. Love thought balloons.
Just having so much fun with it. Now, this kind of stuff for me, I got into this slightly before I got into comics. And I was like that weird little kid at the elementary school library taking out books about Bigfoot and UFOs and pyramids and Bermuda Triangle. And every other kid's taking out, like, I don't know, the Arthur books and whatever else. And I would gravitate towards sci-fi stuff if the documentary type books weren't around, but I was mostly towards that, and then that led into a lot of stuff with comics. And comics were always around in my house just because my mom always picked up something, and I would watch the cartoons, but I fell in love with it more once I realized, wow, this is basically all just sci-fi. A lot of unknown stuff, a lot of mysterious stuff occurring, and I loved comics, so everything has always gone hand in hand for me. And now I'm able to make my own series and have this marriage of the things that I love so very much. And I'm going to do this the rest of my life with this series. Got 100 issues planned already. So awesome. Anyway, yeah, it's invigorating, man. I love it. So for you, with you're talking about In Search Of, and that show that got you into all of that as well. Is there a specific kind of thing that you focus in on? Because I love all of it, but you're always a little bit more well versed in certain things because they really speak to you.
Yeah, so I'm into all of it, and we discussed this before. I'm right there with you. I'm into consciousness, alternate realities. I'm into near-death experiences. I'm into cryptids. I'm into UFOs. But the thing I'm probably into the most right now, because it's wavered. Sometimes it's been UFOs, but now it's ancient civilizations, because I think right now we're getting more like scientific and real information, and not from the narrative and the official version of events scientific. We have scientists breaking away from that and following these amateurs, basically. I don't want to call them, Graham Hancock's not an amateur, and Randall Carlson's not an amateur. Randall Carlson would probably already have his PhD in geology. He, but he's never gone to school. He's just obsessed about it like a madman, and could probably run circles around a lot of archaeologists and a lot of geologists, because what he did is he just goes out in the field, screw school. I'm just gonna, and he reads papers. He talked about how many like scientific papers he reads a year. It's a ridiculous amount. So these are people who are kind of spearheading this new reinvigorated interest in basically Atlantis. Right now, is it Atlantis that was it on an island? Was it on a continent? Is it just a term for a mother civilization? An older civilization? Were there more than one? Lemuria and stuff. Maybe, but like he's gone back to the source. There's a whole run of it's about 10 hours that he's done on Cosmographia. Not the easiest thing to say. Where he breaks down where Atlantis is, where Plato said it was, in the Azores, and he breaks down what evidence he has found. And it's pretty. By the time you're done listening to it, you're all, oh, it was in the Atlantic, and it did sink in the middle of the ocean. And he tells you why, because there was a major impact, or there was some plasma from the sun, whatever, that superheated the ice that was over Canada and over North America, that was up to 2 miles deep, by the way, and pretty much melted overnight and raised the sea levels 400 feet. But I keep forgetting, because I'm an uneducated man. There's a thing, I can't remember the term, but there is a term for weight displacement, basically. So there was 2 miles of ice on North America that made the crust go down. It's iostases or something like that. When that melted, the crust went up, but it doesn't go up evenly. Like, it can correct in other parts of the planet. Well, the Azores just happen to be on this giant, basically, fault line through the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and there is some evidence that was major tsunamis, and that they found beach sand that was supposed to be in very shallow areas, including they found shells that were supposed to be in, there's certain animals that can only live about 100 feet down in the ocean. Well, they found them thousands of feet down. So that area had to be under 100 feet at some point.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just covering like a little bit of it. I definitely recommend you watch it. There's a shorter version on HowTube that you pay for, but it's worth every penny. That's about 4 hours long. That's not 10 hours long. And I highly recommend the talk. But that's what I'm into right now, because of Graham's work and Ancient Apocalypse on Netflix. I don't know if you saw that one, but that's a great series, man.
I got to get into that. I don't have Netflix. Yeah.
Or go to Tortuga. Find another place to watch it.
I've watched a lot of Graham stuff, though, and a lot of his lectures and everything else. It's great. What I find, though, is that Atlantis it's like when people talk about Bigfoot. These things aren't just the exception. These things are the norm. These things were the norm. The sunken cities, that's the norm. Advanced civilizations that are spanning way, way earlier than we possibly could have imagined. That was the norm. So when people are like referring to like a singularity in terms of Atlantis, that it's just Atlantis, it's like there were multiple Atlantises.
It was an empire,
yeah,
or multiple empires across the planet, and we have megalithic sites that have a lot of similarities across the entire planet, including David Hatcher Childress was big on this, the keystone cuts that are in these giant megalithic blocks. So there was these little grooves, basically, that they poured iron, bronze, whatever, some sort of metal that worked as keeping, I don't know how it worked. I don't know if it was there to assemble the blocks or keep them together. We don't know. But there's similar ones in Greece, in Indonesia, in South America.
Yep.
And they're damn near the same shape. That's weird. That's very weird, especially for, did all of these cultures come up with it independently? And by the way, some of these stones are aged by academic by mainstream archaeologists thousands of years apart.
Yeah.
But they all look like
Yeah.
they're pretty much from the same era, you know. So I
And
think
then the
it's-
other part is if they were communicating, let's say it's that, and it's not just some kind of civilization that could travel to we can't contemplate it, but they traveled in some capacity. But if they could all communicate and it wasn't some kind of traveling that they could get across wherever, then that in itself is unbelievable. It's fascinating because how the hell are they communicating at these expansive distances?
they had to be communicating because there's too many similarities in the I guess the architecture, for lack of a better word, the design of their megalithic structures that we wouldn't make today, and some we couldn't build a pyramid today. We couldn't.
Yeah.
We just couldn't. So how in the hell did they do it when they were all wearing loincloths and walking around barefoot with bronze tools? Well, they didn't. That's not how they built them. So I think that the answer we will eventually get to is, there was a giant civilization 20,000 years ago, predating the Ice Age, 30,000, 40,000, maybe it lasts for 10,000 years. There was a giant cataclysm that wiped it from the face of the earth. And that's believable when you consider past cataclysms. We had one 65 million years ago that wiped out the dinosaurs. Well, the one that they think happened 12,000 years ago was almost as bad.
Yeah.
Not quite as bad, but almost as bad. Almost wiped out the human race.
And it was more sudden as well.
Way more. Like it was, and it had a lot of repercussions afterwards. You know, melting. If it landed in the ice cap, it melted the ice caps, and that it was 1,000 years of hell, basically. And they believe that it happened.
That was because of all the cars, right? Right. That was because of all the cars running around.
Yeah. So the ice caps melted because Atlantis had too many diesel Peugeots riding around. That was
Only
it.
they had those electric vehicles, man.
Only had the electric vehicles. Yeah, that's another thing. That's why Randall gets in a lot of trouble. We won't get into details here, but like he debunks climate change pretty easily. And all you have to do is he uses science. He goes back to the Greenland ice cores.
The ice cores. Yep.
Tell the entire story, and we have been in this like golden age of temperature on this planet for the last 10,000 years since the Younger Dryas ended, and it's very, very little. It's actually been warmer in the past, a lot warmer, and it wasn't bad. It was actually good. That's when Greenland melted enough to where the Vikings could go and farm on it for a while, and that's when they came over, and went to Newfoundland and stuff. But they bailed because it got cold again. Cold is bad. Cold is very, very bad. So he debunks that pretty regularly, and he's got this graph that he shows that it's just like this, and then it's kind of a straight line where we are in, and they're talking about an increase of a couple degrees. It was during the Ice Age. It was 18. It was 18 degrees Celsius colder on average. That's pretty freaking cold. Now, there were still parts of the earth that you can live at, and one of those parts was right around, the equator, and where the Azores were, it would have been a paradise there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and the thing that's fascinating to me about that I don't know if I've seen anyone address this, but it got me thinking in terms of the gravitational pull that planets, stars, etc. all have on each other within the universe. Everything is kind of in this perfect little thing based on what's there. Like Earth wouldn't be in the position it's in based on just because like we settled in this thing, but it's because we settled in this region because of the fact that everything else is around it and near it. It all has an impact. So you get these little tilts, that create seasons. You've got climate change every like 3 months on, massive climate change every 3 months or so on this planet. So what if we're seeing something where there's certain things in space or within our own solar system that are having an impact on the gravitational alignment of the Earth, and all you got to do is just have like a minute degree of a tilt, And all of a sudden, you have what is being referred to as this climate change that is allegedly being caused by man, which is really more being caused astrologically, because they're noticing the same thing occurring among all the other planets, that they're all having a climate change as well. But they're not talking about that. But if you dive deep into it, you're like, oh yeah, well, that the research is there, but they're burying that research, which is interesting.
They are, and what we're finding out is the sun, for one, is not this docile little thing. Like, it goes through periods of upheaval, like massive one. We have not experienced it yet. Robert Schoch has done a lot of work on that, Dr. Robert Schoch, and that's an actual academic.
Yep.
And his theory on how the Younger Dryas ended is far more scary than just a pieces of a comet hitting an ice pack. It's the entire Earth randomly being bombarded by plasma, which is essentially like giant lightning bolts. Like, there's tons of sign of vitrification in Egypt and other places where the stone just melted. And they're saying, well, it was from a war. It's like, no, these are temperatures that are in, like, can't get that hot. They just not for that time. So yeah, his theory on it is crazy, and that comes from Velikovsky. That's where Graham gets a lot of his stuff. Velikovsky, Worlds in Collision, and something happened in the solar system, and relatively recently. We're talking, tens of thousands of years recently, maybe hundreds of thousands of years recently, but not millions of years ago. Something happened, and we've got planets that are on their side. And by the way, the Earth wouldn't naturally have this wobble and this tilt. Something had to happen to it. Now, was it the creation of the moon? Who knows? Or
the moon's freaky, man. That thing is freaky. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Was it the meteor that hit the dinosaurs? Was it more recent?
Right.
Because Randall and others have found evidence that Siberia, which is permafrost right now, which means the ground is frozen, like constantly frozen, wasn't. But it was right next to the ice pack that was 2 miles deep, but it was warmer. So Siberia was warmer than North America during the Ice Age because there was millions of mammoth grazing there and eating grass. So it wasn't permafrost. So
there's even that story from, like, I think either the late 1800s or the early 1900s about that dude who saw a mammoth.
Oh, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, he tracked a mammoth back to it was looking for its young, and it tracked it back and saw a mammoth, a mother, he presumed, with its young.
Back in the 1800s,
and
this was surprised.
Yeah, this was either late 1800s or early 1900s.
Well, there's the story, the story of the mammoth, or not the mammoth, the Neanderthal woman. Have you heard that one? So she was part Neanderthal, and she lived until, dude, they covered this on, I think it was Ancient Aliens, one of the shows. But there was this Siberian village that had this wild woman that was part Neanderthal, and she died. The last mammoth that they know, like scientifically know, died basically during Mesopotamia. It's like 3,000, 4,000 years ago. There was a bunch trapped on an island down near Antarctica, and they just inbred, and the last one died. But that's thousands of years after they completely disappeared. The weird thing about the mammoth and mastodons and the saber-toothed tiger and the short-faced bear and, the Clovis people that were the real indigenous people of, well, we don't know about that. But they were definitely here before any of the quote-unquote Native Americans completely disappeared. Like, we don't have a body. We know the Clovis people existed, but they don't exist under a certain... there's like this ash layer, and they haven't found anything above it. They think they know where some bodies are to dig up, but they can't dig them up because they're on ancestral lands, and they're not allowed to. So they have never found a Clovis body. But they have found, under this black mat layer, mastodons, mammoths, all all this megafauna that was over 100 pounds, basically, which got wiped out pretty much around the same time. So that's why they think it was a cataclysm, because they should still exist. There should still be something. So the theory is that man came over and wiped them all out with a bunch of sticks, which would be impossible. But it's also not how it would just be impossible. They'd have to kill like I think the number was like each group would have to kill like 20 a day or something like that. They were so outnumbered. They were just massively. And by the way, they didn't hunt like.
That's like how they built the pyramid in 20 years, right?
Yeah,
That's
right.
Like, yeah.
They didn't hunt short-faced bears and saber-toothed tigers. There wasn't hunting parties out for those things. But also the way hunter-gatherers behave, they weren't just roving through lands and killing everything. They actually were aware that their food had to breed and make more, so they didn't kill everything. So they knew that's how they operated. So I don't buy that for a second. So we have so many stories, and then, I mean, are any of these things left over? We don't know. We don't know. Like in the middle of the Congo, it's so dense, nobody can get in there.
Yeah.
I was talking to Luke Caverns, and he was talking about the jungles in Guatemala, and there's just no human way to get into certain places where they know because Luke Caverns is really good at. He's kind of an expert at finding lost cities. Just a kid too. It's crazy. I just talked to him, but he said, yeah, he was showing us a map, and he's like, yeah, we can get about this far, which showed about 10 miles, which was nothing. Like, and there's all this jungle that we still cannot get to, despite all of our technology and everything. We don't know what's in there, and we have no way of getting in there and getting out without getting a bunch of people killed. So to think we have everything answered is utterly ridiculous. And I think even you, Peter, anybody who's into this subject, it's like, we get so much resistance from the system, from academia, because of egos, and they have this narrative, and we're finding out, dude, Luke Caverns just came out with a video the other day. They found a wooden structure. Did you hear about this in Zambia? This is crazy.
No, I didn't hear about
They
it.
just dug up a wooden structure. So it was logs with like little divots in it, so they can, and they think it's part of something that was huge. Now get ready to hear how old this thing is, because it's insane. It's not like
a wooden structure.
A wooden structure made out of logs, like hominids or human beings chopped down some logs and made a giant hut, cabin, hall. They think it was a significantly huge structure. It just wasn't some like little structure. 500,000 years old.
What?
500,000 years old. 476,000 years old. They dated it to half.
That's right, because they could carbon date it since it's
Yes.
organic material. Wow.
That is beyond anything. So this goes along with another documentary we went over that's on Netflix called Cave of Bones, where they found a hominid species that was burying their dead ritualistically. So they put them in a fetal position, they put a tool in their hand, but this wasn't human. These were basically chimpanzees with a brain 1/3 the size. But they had symbols carved over the graves, and they would bury their dead. That's 300,000 years ago. So we're finding out that not only was it humans weren't the only intelligent species that believed in burying their dead and doing something like that. We can get into theories of, did they believe in God? We don't know. I think realistically, possibility, or it's just reverence for and love for your loved one, and you buried your dead, and maybe humans didn't come up with that. So we also have lots of different versions of humans, and we have not discovered all of them. There's probably versions of humans we never will discover, because they have to die a certain way, and we have to find them, and it's very difficult. So
people act as if there's just skeletal remains everywhere you go, and it's like it's just like sitting there.
Oh, Neanderthals were very intelligent. They like back in the day, they were like considered dumb cavemen, and it turns out that they were like way more intelligent than Cro-Magnon. They were.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And So we're finding out stuff's getting a lot older, but yeah, that story about a wooden structure from 500,000 years ago, like upends everything. So that's going to have to get checked out and everything, but that's a legit report. Go look it up. Luke Caverns just did a video on it if you want to check it out. But that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
But like, it's also like the woo-woo part of this is like, how did they make, like, we don't know what the pyramids there's no hieroglyphics. There is no bodies, no mummies were ever found in the Great Pyramids. Their construction is insane. If you look at it, it's not just the limestone blocks, it's the granite blocks that were lifted up 300 feet. Like, how in the hell did you do that?
Yeah, that's the thing. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that think the pyramids are just like a stack of bricks.
No.
Not that it's like, no, it's an architectural thing, and it resembles more like a machine than anything else, like a power plant.
A power plant.
You know, and it's not like it's just, and that would be crazy enough to construct the pyramids, like they're just like, you know, you're stacking stones. The fact that there's all kinds of things within it, all kinds of chambers, all kinds of stuff, tunnels that seem to have the use of power to light. But there's no evidence of soot. There's no evidence of burning, torches, nothing like that.
None. So how did they light things up? Well, there's a lot of stories out there. David Hatcher Childress. Do I have the book? I'll get you the book title if you haven't read it. It's on Audible. It's an older book. It's like 20 years old, but it's totally worth reading. I'm reading it again for like the 5th time. That's called Technology of the Gods, by David Hatcher Childress, Technology of the Gods. And he just breaks down all those stuff that just doesn't fit. And there is tons of stories of the eternal candles, lights, basically.
Yep.
There's that go from the Roman era. So what have we discovered just lately through COVID and everything, and just through paying attention, that people in power withhold information from us? And I don't think it's
you don't say.
Yeah. So I don't think it's out of the realm possibility that the church, the Roman Empire, the kings of Mesopotamia had maybe leftover technology from this mother civilization that they kept to themselves.
Yeah.
You know,
the Dark Ages being literal and figurative.
Yep.
Before we go further, Bob Gable, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, how much was lost in the Bronze Age collapse? Who were the sea peoples? I think we lost a ton.
Yes. A ton was lost when the Bronze Age collapsed, and they think that was possibly a volcano or a meteor that landed in the Indian Ocean. They're not sure. We don't know who the sea peoples were, but they were pretty formidable. They were pretty formidable. And, maybe those were leftover Atlanteans. Like Egypt kind of sprouted up out of nowhere, right? Ben from Uncharted X has done some great videos on this. Good dude, by the way. He talks about pottery that's been found in pre-dynastic graves. So we're before the Old Kingdom, and it's the best pottery by far. It's stuff that's so insane. We could make it today, but it'd be very difficult, and it'd have to be done by a computer and a machine. Well, like a human couldn't do it. So he's got like this pottery it's perfect circles, perfectly carved out of one piece of stone, and it's the oldest. So what we're finding more and more, even with Göbekli Tepe, with Egypt, if you go down to Bolivia, is the older stuff is better. The older stuff is always better, and it declines as time over. So that tells me leftover technology. Could they soften the stone? Maybe that's how they got all those polygonal stones going, as they can how did they move it? Well, softening it might make it easier to move. Did they use sound? Possibility, who knows? It seems like they were way more in tune with the earth than we are. We use machinery and leverage.
Yeah.
We force things. It seems like they were able to finesse things.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
We use a lot of things that are so transient in how long they're going to be here. I was talking about this the other day. There was a Friendlies that went out of business like 2 or 3 years ago here. and it just sat there, right? And nature took it over. Nature and not like weather eroded and it's 100 years late, 2 or 3 years. Nature took it over. There's a tree that was growing through the damn roof. The whole thing, like you could barely see the roof because the foliage was just all everywhere, right? And then they had to eventually just knock it all down. But it was like, what the hell is? And that was just 2 to 3 years, and no one did anything. No one came around and planted seeds.
No.
No one made a garden out of the friendlies. That was it. It just nature was it. Life finds a way, that kind of a thing. And so if that can occur on that level, to that, this is the stuff we create. It has to be maintained. People have to keep up with it. I mean, look at you can't ever just like leave your house alone and then walk away, right? And then like 10,000 years it's still there. They're making stuff out of stuff that lasted the test of time. It would be built in a way that even in some places where there was earthquake activity, you got seismic activity in this region, and meanwhile that thing was still there. Didn't move, not a crack. The tolerances are unbelievable engineering-wise, and yet we're supposed to believe primitive.
And it just doesn't add up, does it? And that's again, if you like, I highly recommend. Well, I mean, if you've watched a lot of Graham stuff, then you would know. Like Ancient Apocalypse is like Graham's greatest hits, but the one good thing they do is they give you visuals, right? The one thing we haven't had a visual of is like, okay, we have this theory of a flood, right? What's it look like? They kind of show you what it looks like, which is cool. But the reason so much of this knowledge gets suppressed right down from UFOs to possibly cryptids, especially with ancient civilizations, is political correctness and also just ego and hubris. So it's like a lot of people not wanting to rewrite their papers or admit they were wrong.
That's their legacy.
That's and you would think that being a archaeologist, like, you would just want more work to do. I mean, it would just be more work for you, but they get so stuck. And that's humanity for you. And what happened was archaeology got stuck. They got stuck. And all of a sudden, all these amateurs, basically, hobbyists, started doing it and checking out things that they refused to. So Graham, just a reporter, had the wherewithal and the funds to go travel the world and look at all this stuff with his own eyes. And not many archaeologists have gone to the places he's gone. He dived. He went out diving. He's a nut. Graham's a straight up nut. But he did the work. And now, like, after all this time of being just like called woo woo and crazy, he's starting to get like truly vindicated, which is great to see, in his old age. He's getting old. Him and Randall are both getting old, which is sad. But we're finally getting some answers here. And the best part about this is, like, our past is still a mystery. Not everything is answered. And it might be really weird and possibly sci-fi in a very strange way. We're Joe Rogan, he's the one who really started all this by talking to them, and those podcasts blew up. But Joe Rogan, got into the whole ayahuasca thing, and we talk about consciousness and shamans, and that might be where we find the quote unquote aliens, is through consciousness, not through space and time.
Everyone that's doing this stuff apparently sees the same things, has the same kinds of conversations, and that's strange, And it's
so we're either in the Matrix, we're in a simulation, or we're contacting. Maybe it's just a matter of, maybe they're here. We just can't, they're in another dimension, and our brain needs to be tuned in, and we have to basically poison it. Yeah. With ayahuasca.
I'm not someone. That's the thing, is people think like, oh, Pete must be on this and that one. I've never touched a thing in my life. I barely even drink. I don't smoke. I've never done anything. I've got more than enough imagination to keep me going. And that's the thing, is that I'm fascinated by that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I'm like, it doesn't appeal to me to get into that altered state, because I've had dreams that kind of mirror that. I've had really weird dreams lately about certain things that have almost been prophetic in some way, and then in other ways I'm feeling like I'm peeking over the shoulder of someone else into a different world. And I don't know if and they're lucid. And I've always had this kind of stuff. I had a weird dream when I was a kid multiple times of flying, right? And I would fly and I would see my neighborhood, and I would never in a million years be behind in these people's backyards or whatever, right? And these people, I would remember it specifically because I would fly over this big huge tree that was across the street, and heights scare the hell out of me. So in the dream though, I'm like, I'm fine, I'm fine, no nervousness, no nothing. And I'm seeing the neighbor's backyard that's behind the one that's directly across the street, and they have a pool, above ground pool. And that always stuck with me because we didn't have a pool, and I always wanted a pool. And so I'm seeing this pool, and I remember that years later when the amazing surveillance state of Google comes out, and you can go and peek into people's backyards, right? I remember that dream, looked it up. They have a pool. I never saw that pool other than when I flew in my dream to see it.
That's weird. I've had flying dreams before when I was a kid. Flying over my the soccer field across the street from my house and stuff. Totally.
Yeah.
That's weird. Yeah, was it like an astro projection like the chat saying, but a futuristic one? Maybe you were maybe time isn't linear. Maybe it's wibbly wobbly.
Maybe. Yeah.
Jetpacks would be cool.
Yeah, I remember those dreams specifically. I would fly around the neighborhood just a couple of blocks, and it'd be very weird to see certain things, and just like peek, and it would always be at night. It was never a daytime scene. It was always night.
Oh, really?
Which is when I'd be asleep. So that would
Mine
make it
were
even
day.
weirder. Yeah.
Mine were day. I had a bunch of post-apocalyptic dreams. So I'm in my neighborhood, running around, and it's always the one I grew up in La Costa in Carlsbad. So it's always this like residential neighborhood, but it's wiped out. And I can't tell you how many dreams I've had of that, where I'm running around my neighborhood and it's just like completely wiped out by nuclear bomb, who knows what. That always freaked me out as a little bit. I always thought that was just like growing up in the 80s and,
Yeah, getting drilled with that messaging.
Yeah, so.
Over and
but that
over
was the recurring
day.
one I had all the time.
1 second here. I want to say big thanks again to Spicer McLeroy gifting 20 memberships to the chat. Man, oh man, you are amazing, Spicer. This week I think you've gifted like 60 memberships or something. Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate that. We'll add more emojis and have fun with it. And for those that are interested, memberships are 99 cents for the channel. But I recommend instead go to alternacomics.com, pick up some great comics. But anyway, so back to all of this kind of stuff here, man, because we could go down a whole other road with lucid dreaming. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like the stuff with the ayahuasca and everything else, and what people are seeing and experiencing, have and I don't want to ask this of you based on your history, but have you ever had the inclination to want to do a DMT ayahuasca trip?
Maybe when I'm older, when I'm towards the end, maybe. I've had enough trips to know that there's something to it. There has to be, because I was never like a spiritual person at all until I did psychedelics, and it felt like a veil had lifted.
Wow. Yeah.
They're dangerous as hell. So
Yep.
I think Graham and Joe talking about him like, you can, it's like real safe. You're with your shaman or whatever. Like, I wouldn't say that, because like if you suffer from depression, bipolar, I wouldn't touch that stuff.
Yeah, I think you got to be in a certain state of mind, because I've heard some people describe it where it's almost like you're, especially if you're someone who's super grounded, right? You're just, and you're going into it and you're thinking it's going to be a certain thing. It's almost like, you remember in Thundercats when Mumra would see his reflection? He just lose his mind, right? It's like that kind of thing of like you're being confronted. It's almost like Luke was on ayahuasca when he went into that tree or with that little forest.
I mean, I've just seen people not come back, but like those were probably the most quote unquote harmless drugs to me, because long story short, like acid's not something you can get like really addicted to. it stops working. You know, if you try to do it like 2 days in a row, it won't work. You know, that's the way it goes. And I think it depletes whatever it uses in your brain, whatever it is. But like in my experiences, it's been strange. I can't explain it. I can't say I saw machine elves, but it's like you're looking in on our dimension from a different one and seeing things from a whole new perspective. It's pretty cool, but wouldn't recommend it. Ayahuasca, it sounds interesting, but also, like your stomach gets upset. You probably poop your pants. And
that's the common thing too.
It's like, I don't want to do that. I'll just take your word for it. But it is interesting that they had an actual experiment and 5 of the 6 people saw the same thing. And that is strange. That is utterly strange. And I love it. I love strange, by the way. I love hearing stuff like that. I absolutely, that's what keeps me into this. I love the weird. I want our world to be weird. I don't want all the answers. I don't want everything to be linear and boring. I want there to be other dimensions and machine elves out there and UFOs and cryptids.
Magical place, man.
Yep.
And that's the thing is, it seems like the push nowadays in terms of the narrative control, and it's kind of always been this way, but it's really being pushed this way because we have the ability to talk to each other now more than ever before, at least within modern times.
Yep.
And we have the ability to build bridges where that never really was a thing, So having like a big world war in the conventional sense is harder than ever before because you're like, but I have friends over there.
Yeah.
I know these people. Yeah, sure, there's a couple of differences, but, we have a lot more in common.
Yep.
And so the goal all the time is divide and conquer. But it's not being done militarily with military to military anymore. It's being done heavily with those in power in the establishment to those that are the rest of us. So that's how you get a situation of the few controlling the many. And a lot of people wonder, well, how is that possible? How can you do that? Of course it's possible. You're talking about people who have been established for a very, very, very long time and are in positions of power because of that. So when they're in that position of power and they have certain things that they're aware of course they're going to keep people not so aware of that. And I really think a big push towards that is the ability of that when we all get together and we can focus on something, when we can concentrate our purpose and our energies towards something, that we can accomplish unbelievably amazing things. And of course, as you see, we're trying to be isolated in more ways than one, over and over and over again. And there's a big reason, I think, as to why, when we're talking about these ancient civilizations, why they could accomplish these seemingly impossible things. Because there was that factor of it's us against the world. All we have is each other. We got to find a way to make it work. And you have all these types of ceremonies. You have all these kinds of cultures that talk about coming from the sky, coming from the stars, all the time too, even like direct star systems, talking about things like that and concentrating their energies, concentrating their humanity upon their goals and what it is they wish to achieve. And they achieve these things. And nowadays, I think we're seeing us being kept apart more than ever before because of that. Because we are strength in numbers is not just a cliche; it's true.
It's true. So the empires rise and fall, but they don't really fall. The people in charge of that empire fall, but mutate. The resources from that empire rebrands, mutates, turns into another empire, and it's been the same one since pretty much Noah's flood. You can call it a flood, Noah's flood. There was a flood. I don't know if it flooded the entire earth, but there was certainly a flood in North America.
Oh, it definitely hit civilizations. Yeah, absolutely.
I forgot the number. It's a ridiculous number of cultures have a flood myth. And what do we hear about, Atlantis and anything older than 6,000 years? Well, there's no pottery. There's no record. I would argue there's the records have been staring us in the face the whole time, and I'm not the only one. I got this through Velikovsky, and it's through mythology. These stories are actually the record of our past. Maybe embellished, maybe not. Don't know. And I believe in some crazy stuff. I believe, sure, there could have been giants. Now the giants, not like 30-foot tall giants, but 8 or 9 foot people. Sure, absolutely. There's lots
I
of
mean,
record of that.
the megafauna and animals that
Yep.
are way bigger than the animals we know, say insects that were huge. The
Huge.
oxygenation levels of the world were completely
There
different.
was a sloth that was 20 feet tall. A sloth. So why couldn't the humans be a little bigger? Was there more oxygen? Was there more carbon dioxide? Like, what? We don't know. We have freakishly huge trees still, the giant sequoias, but not a. And we do have leftover megafauna in Africa, but the thing is, like over here, we had 4 species of elephant. We had horses. We had the short-faced bear is probably the scariest thing because it's kind of like a bear panther. It's like huge and fast as hell and would have killed you dead. So I think that information is there. It's just there for us to interpret. I think we're really just way off. How they date a lot of the megaliths is from the carbon around it. So, they go under it sometimes, but that could be just when it was put there. It could have been like so much of it has been repurposed. And then there's straight up areas that look like it was like some Legos that a kid just swiped. Pumapunku is one of those. They've only dug down 3 feet. They know there's so much more. And that's where the H blocks are, those crazy H blocks that are like precise. By the way, we watched a documentary. Those H blocks are exactly a meter wide. So the meter, which was supposedly discovered by the French or something, it was rediscovered. So we're finding a lot of this stuff was rediscovered, and they like even in that Technology of the Gods, which is an older book, you're finding out that iron smelting goes way further back than they say, and we don't even know who came up with it. It appears it was in India and China way before it was in the West, and guns. They think I think it was the Germans came up with guns, but then they're finding out no, the Chinese had guns like way before that. A thing that would be considered a gun, which was basically like a like piece of bamboo that they could shoot things out of. So it's looking like a lot of our technology was just rediscovered, passed down. We don't really know where it comes from, and I think that's great. I think it's great. I think what's not great is the institutions that just try to
the suppression of
squash
information
it, and suppress it.
Yeah. And we see that across the board. And that's the thing where I'm finding so many interesting parallels between that and the comic industry, entertainment, culture, which is, being produced by that. It's something that it's all connected, obviously. But when we're talking about a mainstream narrative that's being pushed to suppress information, to create a cultural shift or a certain way of thinking that's supposed to be more prevalent than another way of thinking, it's like you said before, it's not coming from the bottom up, which is usually how that stuff grows organically. It's coming now at this point, especially from the top to the bottom of like, these are the words from whoever, the few, and they're pushing this kind of narrative throughout. And it's, to me, when people go, and this is the kind of thing that drives me nuts when there's certain people who either love this sort of stuff or create it for a living, and they dismiss the importance of it while also admitting how important it is.
Yep.
So if you're to say that, the culturally these stories have such an impact, yeah, sure, it's fiction, but it's all fiction with a little kernel of truth, right? Every single thing ever of fiction has that little bit of, and that's why it resonates. So you get people in there, and it drives me nuts when they're creating these sort of things, and they treat it as if there's, it's made up, right? It doesn't matter. It's fiction. It's just stories. What are you talking? It's not real stuff, right? It's just like it's everything. It's everything that defines what humanity is and has been and will continue to be. That is how we communicate who we are, what we're about, what inspires us, what makes us afraid. Every single aspect of that is through storytelling.
Stories predate civilization by millions of years, maybe thousands. We don't know.
Imagine harnessing the power for that and going that's the way you can really get people. Is through the power of stories.
Through the power of stories, and that's why one side recognized that, the other side didn't, and that's why we have this massive imbalance now. That's dangerous. I mean, it flat out is. That's why Razor Fist had a great tweet the other day. Like the culture war comes from a cultural revolution. So we were in a cultural revolution, whether we knew it or not. And it turned into an outright metaphorical shooting war around 2016. And we're still in it right now. And it's a fight for the soul of our country. It's the soul of Western civilization. It's pretty important. And one of those institutions that we and it's not just Republicans, it's just free-thinking people, abandoned was entertainment and storytelling, along with schools and other things too. But we abandoned these institutions, and they are institutions. We cannot just rip them out or walk away from them or black pill from it. We don't have a choice. So we can either, just kind of go with the flow and let the elites make decisions for us, or we can start fighting back and talking to each other more and going, this is all a bunch of BS.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you got to create. You got to put it out there. You got to make it, and that's how you win. That's how you win, because if we're going to be caught up in the constant thing of waiting for them to do that's the funny part. It's the same thing with the strike and the tweet you made earlier today, where it's like, oh, so you acknowledge the corporate greed side of it while wanting to be a part of the corporate greed. Okay.
I mean,
not wanting to create a separate system, not wanting to go independent, not wanting to go a different path, because you've acknowledged that this path is bad. This path leads towards something bad. No, instead it's like, oh, well, it's only bad when they keep us out of it.
Yeah. Please keep us around, you greedy corporate bastards. Eric July said it best. They're begging to sign a deal with the devil. So they called the corporations the devil, and now they're begging to sign a deal with them. It utterly makes, it does make sense, because they don't hate the corporations. They love them. It gives them the creatives who are in Hollywood. It gives them their identity. It also relieves them of responsibility, so they can phone in a bunch of crappy art. If you are an artist worth your salt, you wouldn't need that. But it's the system. It's like we want other people to get, basically not share the risk, take on the risk for my art that I might half-ass. And it's like owning your own business. You're going to be way more into it than working for somebody.
And Gary, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm gonna go out on a limb with this analogy, with this metaphor here. To me, I see it as it mirrors almost like an addictive behavior, and the addiction is to the power that these companies have given these individuals, and when they have taken it away, you see the addict essentially go, "But how am I going to get my fix? You gave me this power. You've given me this platform. You've given me this spotlight, the money, the lifestyle I have. And now you're saying what? You're saying that I can't really have that?" And it's turning into a situation, instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to go sober. I'm going to get away from the system. I'm going to get away from the thing that is making me hooked into this bad life. Because ultimately that's where it's going. Instead, it's saying, well, if you can just give me like a little bit more, I'll still be here. And that's the part where it drives me nuts, because it's these people that you're in a time where you can go independent 100%, and there's people already that are doing it, but you can go independent and experience a level of success and a level of freedom and be beholden to your audience and your story and your craft, and not beholden to corporations and subsidized through various governments and various other networks and investment firms and whatever else, and they're the ones with the tails wagging the dog, essentially.
Yep.
And you can be the artist you want to be and have maybe a little less money, maybe I would say probably not for many. I'd say they probably stand to gain more. But you're in a time frame now with ways to directly engage with your audience and ways to create something together. And you don't need the corporate approval. You don't need to go through the bureaucracy of any of that. And that's if that was just simplified down to that, which it's not. So now you're in that system and you want more from that system and you think that system is going to be nicey nice to you. And are you crazy? Get out of the system.
Get out of that system, because it's I agree with you. I think the money would be negligible. I think it's time. I think the time that people have to spend hustling and BSing and backstabbing and playing corporate politics in Hollywood probably takes up half their lives. Pitching and all this stuff. It's and relying on middleman after middleman, your agent, casting directors, producers, all these hurdles you have to go over that are mandated by your unions, by the way.
Yeah.
And instead of just like, hey, maybe I can just go straight to the people now, because it's like you said, it's easier now than ever. That should be easier for a very talented writer. A very talented writer could just go write a damn novel, and it doesn't need to be a New York Times bestseller. If it sells, thousands of copies, you can make a decent living off that and not have to waste a bunch of time kissing some producer's ass. Because what we're finding out is most of Hollywood isn't successful. There's a lot of money flowing in and out of that town. And I recognize that when I worked there, for like the amount of money that's just wasted. No, it's the one major success that pays for the now 20 to 30 failures. And it's not sustainable. It's just not a sustainable model. It should be a gig economy. I'm a big fan of the gig economy, because that's what, if you're out there willing to work, what I learned at the comic shop, if I wanted to raise, I just worked harder.
Yeah,
innovated.
Keeps you motivated.
Yep.
Keeps you on your toes, keeps you motivated, keeps you honest.
But also, if you're independent and you're not working for this corporation that's always got to satisfy some shareholder, which is this constant trough of crap that has to be thrown in to keep them happy. You have to make a profit, and it has to be above a certain percent every year. When you're a little independent operator, you can just break even, or do as well as you did last year, or a little worse, but it's not going to break you. And if you have a success, it's like, whoa, I can take a couple days off. That's what, like, when I do a video, right, I take a couple days off. I work like hell on this video. I don't see my wife and kids for a couple days, and then I got a couple days hanging out with them. And that's how I do it. I could go out and make another video the next day, but I don't, because I like to see my family. So I give up some money right there, but that doesn't matter to me, because I've got this freedom that you cannot put a price on, and that's thanks to everybody who supported this channel, my channel, forever, and I'm grateful for that. But the work ethic remains. Like, I get back to work, but I also take the time not to burn out, and time is more valuable to me than money, especially when you're at my age. And I spent so much of it working for the man, and running my own business, and then having to start over. I've had multiple careers, and this is the best one I've ever had, because I choose when to come to work, and I end up working like my ass off, quote unquote working, but I love it. I love what I do. And so many people in Hollywood forego that so they can work for the machine, and they're begging to work for the machine, and it's kind of crazy when you think about it, because they still rely on independent production companies to make content, right? So
Yep.
the Netflix, I think they have studios now, but they used to not, and they would just hire production companies to make stuff. And I think you think it would be easier than ever to have a production company, and you think it would be. I read an article recently, like, this was supposed to be decentralized. That, like, the streaming wars were supposed to decentralize things, but they did the opposite.
Yeah.
And now when this strike's over, you're going to have more mergers. You're going to have fewer companies in control of more stuff. So the producers won. This thing ends tomorrow, the producers won because there's going to be fewer people to pay. And a lot of people who are on strike are going to never work in Hollywood again because they would need to be on that corporate teat. Instead of like, hey, I'll just do, if I'm an actor, find other actors, do your own thing. It is possible. Start a web show. No, you're not going to get rich and famous off. Probably you weren't going to get rich and famous anyway. But if you have like a little niche thing, like what people are doing in comics now, that should be good enough because you're free to be artistically free, which is great. How many people go to Juilliard or wherever acting school is, and they're like, the biggest thing on their resume is like a tampon commercial. Like that must suck. That must absolutely suck.
Yeah, it's a strange dynamic, and it's very odd when I'm seeing so many people. All I've done for 17 to almost 18 years in comics is I've never worked for a big corporation. I've never worked for anyone else. I've just worked for me. And when I did work for other people, I was working. I worked a lot early on. I did free work, and not for exposure because I wasn't an idiot. Working for free for exposure is like the stupidest myth that everyone has come up with because they don't want to work for experience. They'd rather just, it's about, we're working for exposure. There is no exposure. There's no exposure. And the thing is, you don't want to work for exposure when you're starting off because you suck. And if everybody sees how bad you suck and you're working for exposure, what the hell did you gain from that? You actually got a negative. So you kind of don't want anyone to see your early stuff. You just want to have someone to work with, give you some feedback, and you can improve. So I did as much as I could to learn various parts of the industry and the craft, and then it just grew and grew and grew. So here I am 17 to 18 years later. Always been independent, and I've been surrounded by a lot of people who've been that way. So for people to come across and go, you have to have the corporate tie, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to have... It's so mind-numbing, especially for people who, and we see it in comics now, but it's very rare to see it outside of that for the most part. Maybe in music you see it as well, because a lot of those people come up and it is like you got your back to the wall. You're on the road, you're doing small gigs, you build up, and then eventually you get to somewhere. But then you come out the other side and you're like, yeah, been there, done that with the record company thing. Going to go independent now that we've got more of a platform, more of an audience, that kind of a thing. Kind of like what happened with Image. So to see the same thing play out, there was a time period where they had all the sympathy in the world from me. People did not know what they were getting into. The world changed on them faster than they could predict it, and it was tough to get out ahead of it. And the world wasn't situated in a way yet where you could go independent and still maintain a level of success or surpass the success that you had previously. But we're in a world right now where you can do that, and to see so many people still obsess over the fact that they can't, that to me, it's like, well, that's a personal shortcoming that you have to get over. Or does someone have something on you? It's that level of, which one is it? Because you can go for it. You can go and you can have that success. You got to put in the work. You got to be ready to build. You got to be ready also to be held accountable to the audience you're trying to create this thing for. So you can't go running around and when you have failures, just blame the audience left and right. It's their fault that they didn't show up. That you can't do that. You have to be humbled by the experience and understand that it takes two to tango when you're making art. So it's like you just can't put it all out there and then do a field of dreams scenario. You have to work for it. But to me, if you've got someone that has a huge platform, a huge audience, whatever it may be, and you're out there and you're creating what you're creating, the game is up at this point for you to lose. It's your game to lose. There's no reason that if you don't succeed, you did something drastically wrong. So to see that corporate push, I can't understand it for the life of me, but it's just not who I am. So that's probably why it's difficult.
I mean, I'm the same way, right? So I think people, particularly people in Hollywood, they go there and they have these dreams and they're going to get this big show and they're going to get this big paycheck. And what they find out real quick, that even if you're on a really popular show, unless you've been around and paid your dues, you don't get paid very much. But it's still Get they were talking about certain actors getting a base pay of $8,000 a week while they're on the show. That's really, really fucking good. Excuse me, I just did it again, but that's really good. That's really good.
That's the thing. So many people, I've talked to so many people that think that it's all back end pay for these people, and they're making like 35 cents. And I'm like, that's not what you're talking about.
That's not how it works. They're actually getting more front end pay, but I mean that's for the people who work their butts off and get. There are a ton of working actors that are just like middle class actors, bring their lunch pail and go hustle.
Most of them are like that. Yeah, 100%.
And good for them. That's great. That shows a ton of
Same
drive,
with the
and
production crew and everything. Yeah,
tons of respect for that. But it's still a gig economy. Nothing is guaranteed in this world. And if you went out, it's harder for an actor, but for a writer, you can go out on your own and self-publish some stuff and make a few bucks here and there, and probably, have a pretty good life. But you're not going to live in a mansion. Right. But, I never wanted to live in a mansion when I was, I busted my butt doing my blue collar job, and was happy to get a condo, like a crappy little condo and a crappy little house. I never thought I was like, I'm going to get my big suburban home or my ranch when I'm 30. That's not realistic. Stuff is really expensive. It's not the 50s and 60s anymore. So I just bought crappy things and worked my way up, and it worked, but I was okay with my crappy little house. I was like, it's mine. It's my crappy little house. So I'm very proud of this. And it's about having achievable goals, basically. Don't shoot for the moon, especially when you're, a creative. Achievable goals, and don't be so hard on yourself. And I think, especially with creativity, make sure you truly love it, because there's a lot of creative people with tons of talent, comic book artists, who get sick of drawing. Like they could absolutely continue going and make tons of money, but they just get sick of it and they stop enjoying it.
The whole system's a meat grinder.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's been well known to be that way for a long time. Before we continue, I want to get to a couple super chats that kind of made me chuckle a bit. Bob says, Gary, make peace between Pete and Eric. Thanks. There's peace between me and Eric. Don't worry, Bob.
Good.
At least, I mean, I really dug what he was doing with, because to me, I mean, I get what people are talking about, well, what Bob's talking about with what happened. I don't know, maybe 2 years from now. I can't keep track of time. So there was a squabble between me and Eric on Twitter, which is, the place where squabbles are they just thrive, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't actually discuss anything. And it seems like both of us were in a position of being stressed at the time. I was going through a bunch of stuff. He was obviously, gearing up for Rippaverse and everything else. So misunderstandings took place on both sides, and that was that, and cooler heads later on, months later. Recently, I saw Eric had worked with Comic Books for Kids, which I work with as well, to donate. I'm actually donating a bunch of books because of Alternaween this year, which we're doing for the fifth year.
That's right. I know Alternaween. That's awesome.
Yeah. And getting comics out to the masses so they can send them out as trick-or-treats for the kids on Halloween. And so every $1,000 we raised, we were donating 100 comics to Comic Books for Kids. So I saw Eric doing that, and donated a bunch of stuff, and it's a great charity. And I was like, that's awesome, man. We do that too and everything. And yeah, we just had like a nice little interaction. And to me, it's one of those, it's so overrated, I think, what happens when the tempers can flare up, and that's it. I know Eric's a good dude, and I'm sure he knows the same about me, and there's no beef. I don't think there's been a beef for quite some time.
Eric doesn't trip on that stuff. He'll say what he says on Twitter, but then he'll talk to you the next day. Eric's a good dude.
Yeah, exactly. And then John says, Pete, make peace between Gary and Ethan. Thanks. I'm not even aware of any of that. I mean,
there's no war. There's just nothing. That's peace.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why I'm like, I'm not, but both of those made me chuckle.
I stay out of the drama. People want to talk about it, that's fine, but I stay away from it.
And yeah, and sometimes, and I don't know the specific situation, but I've had this with other people too. Because man, oh man, if I kept going at it with everyone who's ever come at me, holy crap, that would be my whole life. That would be my whole life, and I would accomplish nothing. I would get nothing done. I'd be unbelievably miserable. And it's sometimes if there's going to be peace, you have to have peace apart. And that's sometimes the best form of peace. People just go on their separate paths sometimes. That's just how it is.
Yeah, I like if I have a beef with somebody, I'm not going to get in their way. You know what I mean? That's not especially when they're making money or doing their thing on YouTube. We're not going to be all buddies. That's not realistic.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't get in anybody's way either. So
yeah, and again, I don't know the details of it or anything like that, but everybody, there's lots of love for everybody, and it doesn't mean people I think tend to have a maybe sometimes they treat it like the way when your parents get a divorce or something, and you're like, if you just got back together, everything would be great again. But the thing is, it wasn't great, was it? It's that kind of thing. It's like, now it'll be better if the two people who aren't getting along are apart, and they could still love you and appreciate you, hopefully. But I mean, man, there were days
I'm
when
not going to talk to my first wife again.
Yeah, right. There were days when I was a kid, I was like, please.
I mean, I hope she's doing great. I do. but
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, and Bob asks Gary, is George R.R. still writing? # finish the book.
Everything but A Song of Ice and Fire.
I forgot all about it. That's just
Dude, there's been a strike, right? So he's had ample time to work on the book, and he's just been doing everything but. Haven't heard anything. So yeah, I doubt we'll see Wins a Winner. I kind of thought he'd get it finished, but I doubt we'll see it. We definitely won't see the last book. That's just not happening.
Yeah. And I think at this point, I mean, man, if you're still out there looking forward to it, my sympathies.
God, I want it. I truly do, because I've read those books so many times. But now, I've had to let go. Like we just said, you just gotta let go of some stuff, man.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. All right, so we are at the 2 hour and 10 mark. Let's cap it off at 2.5. So 20 more minutes. Now I'm dying to ask you this one question. All right, you have and we'll go back to comics for the last 20 minutes. And I could, because seriously, we'll be here for 4 more hours if we're going to talk paranormal stuff. And man, I would love to be on Forbidden Frontiers, but that is up
we'll
to
get you on. We'll get you on.
Yeah, hey, I'd love it. Okay, so with comics, if you had your druthers, right? So if you had your way, you are ruler of the comic industry. What changes would you make?
Oh, as far as big two, are we or just all of the comic book industry?
Just the whole industry. You have every aspect of it. You have the power of a comic book god, and you can just arrange this, that, put this there, do that there, boom, 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 and you're like, perfect.
First thing, you have to get the quality of comics together. So if I'm a comic book god, I have all the money in the world, I would hire the best talent at the big two, pay them what they're worth. Absolutely what they're worth, because you would get that back tenfold, and have them be interested in it. That's and it would have to be a small, but the big two, I would break down to their core. I would cancel every book except for Amazing Spider-Man, except for the classic ones, and I would start over with that and bring them back to basics. I don't know, have Peter Parker married to Mary Jane. That'd be one of the first things I would do right there. Tim Drake wouldn't be gay. And I would bring the core heroes back to what they were, having the best people on them. As far as publishing is concerned, I'd open it up. I'd be like, we need to get books back in gas stations and 7-Elevens and freaking Walmarts. And I don't know if it'd help, but that's what I'd try to do. And I would take a cue from manga. You would have to take a cue from manga, and we'd have to think about how we print these things, how expensive they are. I think you and I talked years ago. Pulp, baby, pulp. Pulp
It's,
makes books cheaper.
not to toot my own horn here and tout some of our books, but I mean, this is newsprint. This is newsprint.
Yep.
And people are like, you can't make good looking comics nowadays on
Bull,
newsprint.
bull. I would put them all on newsprint to make them cheaper, so people would read more of them and buy more. But it's so bad. That's like a dream world. You bring back the talent, you bring back respect for the character, you bring back these core characters, you get rid of all these stupid ideas. Stop doing events, for one. Go back to episodic comics, right? And ground things for a little while. You can do an event later, but it would just be back to basics. I don't know if that's even possible right now, but that's what I'd love to do. I'd love to see good storytelling come back. And then through that, I would also translate more French comic books, because I think they are fantastic. They are wonderful. And there's a bunch of stuff we've never seen because it hasn't been translated yet. I think French comic books are... I went to a couple French comic book stores in Paris, and it was unbelievable. Unbelievable. They're huge.
Yeah.
I mean, they're massively huge, and those books sell. So they have their own manga there. And I would prefer French comics over anything because they're largely not superhero books. They're cartoony books, and there's westerns. There's every genre imaginable, and the art is unbelievable. Couldn't tell you what the story is because it's all in French. But French comics are insane. So I would translate more of them for sure. But yeah, for publishing, that's a tough one, man.
Is there anything, big two aside, is there anything that you would want to see more of in terms of story, in terms of type of character? And again, like you don't have to think about the practicality of it. I'm not interested in that.
Oh,
I'm interested
fantasy.
in yeah.
I'm like, that's what I grew up on, like heavy metal and Conan. I'd like to see a lot more fantasy. I think it's perfect for comic books. And it doesn't have to be like all sword and sandals, and it could be like the sci-fi, what Star Wars came out of was Star Wars is a fantasy.
Yeah.
So the sci-fi / fantasy, I'd love to see more of that. And I think those worlds that's my favorite kind of storytelling. So tons of it. I would like to see a lot less of autobiographical comic books. The independent comic books got so lame. It just everything I know there's a place for it and stuff, but I hated like blankets and stuff like that. Scott Pilgrim. I liked the movie, didn't like the comic books at all. I sold the crap out of them, but wasn't a fan. But I like, because I like it when comic books do things that movies and TV shows cannot.
Yeah.
So that's, and they, they get bizarre and weird.
Yeah, no comics being made with a budget for film or show in mind. That's when comics were just, oh my Lord. Incredible. The only budget there were the skills of the creators. What could they do? What could they dream up? What could they render? Unhinged, thank you, brother, says we need people who actually care about the comics and the characters to work on them, to respect what was created before and build. And that's the thing to me that's exciting about the indie comics that are coming out now, is that it's like you're getting on the ground floor, and everyone takes for granted that these characters that are here now and very popular, that they've been there forever, right? Spider-Man, Batman, whatever. But there was a time when they were brand spanking new, and no one knew what the hell these things were. And then when you talk about Marvel, it was like, less than 5 people in their heyday when they were just starting and getting things going. And it's like, it basically, for all intents and purposes, an indie company making superhero books. And then stuff just took off. And I feel like we're seeing the onset of that right now. We're seeing those fledgling kinds of characters that have so much potential. There's so much potential right now. Nothing has hit like an iconic status yet. But you know what? Those other characters have had like 70 or so years. So let's check back in 70 or so years with some of these
Yeah.
creators and see what's happened.
See what they created. But I mean, that's essentially what's happening now is if things are going back to basics. But it's you guys. It's the independent guys going back to basics and being there for the love of it and creating new things. And it's probably not going to blow up like it did back in the day because there wasn't a bunch of, the competition, believe it or not, there was competition back then, but it's nothing compared to the competition there is now. There is so many independent comic books, and that's good. The more, the better. We'll find them, and I think the good ones will find a way. And what the independent sphere needs to conquer is consistency. You've done that. You put out your books pretty consistently. So that's where the independent sphere, that's where we'll know where things rise up. And it doesn't need to be once a month. I don't think that's realistic anymore. If it is, that's great. But I think if you're doing a prestige book like Eric plans to do and others, like once a quarter, I think that's, like how Heavy Metal used to come out. I think that's reasonable. I think that's pretty reasonable. Or if you do a novel size, like a pretty thick novel size one once a year, I think that's reasonable. As long as you're telling a good enough story that hooks people in, we'll see.
Well, because that's the thing too, is that, like you said, there's so many books out, right? So there's people who they keep up with a lot of this stuff, even with Alterna, and they're like, I'm still a year behind because there's so many books, there's so many things going on. There's life, there's everything. So the even if you put out a book every single month, the likelihood of everyone reading that book every single month is far less than what it was before.
You're right.
So, and plus that was another thing that was part of the bad system of putting people through that meat grinder. So there's a difference between someone putting out a book like once every 5 years or something or whatever than there is between someone putting out something quality every year. That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And I like how like some of the campaigns are doing like special things. They're doing comic boxes and foil covers. I'm down with all that. I love it. I think make it a special experience, but also, make the basic comic. I don't mean to call alternative basic, but like make a comic book. Make sure the story's good. And I am fine with it being on newsprint. I love the floppy. Like, I hate trades, right? So I own some, but I hate them. I can't stand them. I like reading comic books in their purest form, which is the floppy.
Yeah.
So if I want to, if there's a story out there, and I do the same for my kids, if there's a story I want them to read, I don't buy them a trade. I buy them the comic books. I'm gonna read them the way I read them, and I think collected versions. There's like prestige hardcovers and fancy stuff. Yes, I do like that stuff. But your basic biatch, trade, not a fan. At my store, I stopped buying them altogether. I just they became such a waste of time. They were heavy, and sure I'd sell like 10 Watchmen a month, sell 10 Sin City a month, but the rest of them kind of didn't sell. So I did a buyback program since I was near San Francisco State. So what I started doing is like, I'll buy your trades, for like pennies on the dollar, and that's how I stocked my trade section. I stopped buying trades from Diamond back in, I think, 2009, and didn't miss it at all. I did my buyback program. It was so much cheaper, and I had bookshelves full of trades, and I just did the used bookstore format, and it worked great. Yeah.
That's the funny part is even at Alterna, we did the first 10, 11 years. It was mostly just putting out trades and graphic novels. And when I saw in 2015 or so and when we started doing that, everyone was like, that's crazy. You're just going straight to trade, straight to graphic novel. And it worked for the life of the independent creator that could do one book a year as opposed to single issue output and things like that. It was more acceptable to have that come out one trade a year, one graphic novel a year. So when I noticed that all of a sudden the turnaround, especially in bookstores, went from 6 months to a year, turning to 1 to 2 months, and then we're getting returns back on the second or third, I'm like, what is going? These are trades. These are supposed to be on the shelf for a
Forever.
decent amount
Yeah.
of time.
Yeah.
And it's because why? Because everyone started flooding the market with trades.
Yep.
And that's what spurned us into going with the newsprint, which I always wanted to do, but I could never really find the proper printer. And now we got books at like between $1.99 to $2.25, and it's on this beautiful thing known as newsprint that a lot of comics were on for a very long time. And with King Cryptid, going back to your point with trades, I'm not putting out a trade at King Cryptid for 10 years. 10
Good.
years.
Do an omnibus. I'm down with omnibuses. I love those. But and graphic novel, of course, is the original. Like I'm down with that's fine too. But the floppy is my favorite thing. I love comic books, and it's weird. I repurposed all my new buying into. I just buy back issues, and I'm just buying weird. I just bought a Superman 45. Father Christopher Miller put it up on Twitter, and I'm buying covers that aren't politically correct, so super racist covers basically. But this one's,
you mean when everyone says comics have always been political, and they point to
I'll point to I've got like one. This isn't politically incorrect. This is one of my favorite. This is Captain America fighting communists.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah,
that's
I
classic.
love this one. Well, I got one where Superman is coming out of the ground and he's in China because he went down the whole. It's so terrible. It's great.
Do they still have that site, Super Dickory? Remember that site?
Yes, Super Dickory is. I think it's still around. I love that site, by the way.
Oh man, yeah.
We used to. It was because Superman was a dick in the 50s. Like he was an outright dick, and it points it out. But it also had the other pages of like Batman and Robin being really gay. So it's hilarious, and that stuff was done on purpose, by the way, because of the comics code and stuff. The artists were rebelling, and Super Dickory, it's a great site. It used to be easier to navigate than I think it is now. I haven't checked in a couple of years.
Yeah, I haven't checked in a couple of years either, but I used to be in tears from a lot of all the Superman covers and
I'm
a lot of
smacking Lois.
Oh my lord.
Dude, you want to see like the old Popeye cartoons? They had them at UCLA. I went there and went to their Museum of Modern Art and ignored all the modern art and went right to the Popeye, the H.R. Segar Popeye cartoons. Were terrible. He was always like punching Olive. It was, and you laugh. You gotta laugh, but man, those old Popeye comics, woo. Funny
they
stuff,
were
dude.
Wild times, and that's why it's always interesting to me when people bring up, oh look, there's a Cap, he's hitting Hitler. See, comics were always political. I'm like, you know what comics were like back then? You know what the world was like back then?
Do you know what the world was like?
Like, that's a strange frame of reference to be like, that's when your ideal world and what it looked like.
Right.
But again, it makes perfect sense because it's like, yeah, okay, you're pointing out a propaganda type thing and you're for propaganda. So it's like,
Okay.
I get it.
That's consistent.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
Man, oh man. Okay, so we got 4 minutes left. Gary, seriously, man, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. Everybody in the chat, thank you guys as well. Holy smokes.
Thanks, chat.
Yeah, and seriously, if you're out there and you're an independent comic creator and you're doing your thing and you're feeling like you're not gaining any traction, seriously, please keep up with it. Please keep up with it.
Yeah.
Spread the word about your stuff. Get it out there. Keep sharing your work. It takes time. It takes time, and you're going to continue to grow. You're going to continue to get out there. I can't give you any better advice than that. I've seen so many talented people give up too soon. And it's like that meme where the person is digging the tunnel to get treasure, and they give up right before.
Yeah.
Don't do
I can't agree with I cannot agree with you more. If anything, having a creative outlet, even if you have another job, is like it's just good for the soul. It's good for you. So and never look at any time you spend on it as wasted at all. No, you're actually feeding your soul, you're feeding creativity. We need it as humans, and you will get better. You will get better the more time you take. Some people have more talent than others, obviously. It might take you longer. And you know what? It might not be a best-selling novel or comic book, but it's yours, and you finished it. And as long as you're having a good time, don't get frustrated doing it. Like art, being creative. There are a lot of people who just paint pictures for themselves. They don't ever sell them. They're not gonna, and that's been going on for thousands of years. By the way, there used to be people who just I know my mom used to paint by numbers. Never showed anything. Never hung it up. She just did it because it was fun. It's good for you. And it
Absolutely.
I was in a stupid garage band that played bars. We were never gonna make it. I didn't care. I didn't care that we played for like 20 people. I don't care. I was hanging out with my friends and having fun. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
Have fun. Have fun.
The universe is telling you to do something like that, to get that out into the world, express yourself in a creative way. Do it. Listen to it. Get it out from your head and get it out there. And again, it doesn't matter if it's for a lot of people, for a little people, or just for yourself. Mm-hmm. Pursue that creative endeavor. It's meant to be out there. There's good that comes from that. That is a pure positive experience. But other than that, man, thank you guys in the chat. And above all else, thank you guys out there that are supporting independent works and the readers out there that make this stuff possible for a lot of people who are pursuing these endeavors as well. You guys, man. You get me right there, because there's nothing better than when you're creating something and you're putting your heart and soul into it and someone comes along and it's like, I love this. Nothing better than that. So thank you guys for making that possible. And that's the positive connection. That's the stuff that binds us. That's the stuff that ties us all together. When it resonates, and you get that, right? Everything's frequency, everything's energy. And that's resonating when we get two people coming together. And sometimes you're not even existing in the same world at the same time, but you read something from someone and there's a moment of time that's now bridged and it means something to you and it lives on. So it's important. It's really important. But yeah, other than that, thank you guys so much again for watching tonight. Gary, thank you for your time, for the conversation. Cheers. It's been a blast. And everybody, if you enjoy the show, give it a thumbs up. If you like this, we've got a ton of interviews on the channel, and there's going to be a ton more. And make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications, all that good stuff. Spread the word about the channel, and really appreciate you guys being here, watching, participating in the chat. It means a lot. Other than that, Alternaween ends tomorrow. It's the last day tomorrow to back Alternaween. So if you guys want to check that out, go to alternacomics.com. It's also on Fund My Comic and Indiegogo. We are putting comics out there into the hands of the readers that support so they can get comics to trick-or-treaters on Halloween. I can't wait to hear stories, like let's say 20, 30 years from now, of some amazing comic creator that's like, on an interview, first comic. Oh, that's weird. My first comic was on Halloween. It was like an Alterna comic I got. Trick-or-treating. That's going to happen. And it's going to happen because the people in the chat, the people out there that read, the people out there that support Alterna, you guys make that happen. And that's going to be an amazing thing. You're getting someone's first comic, a kid's first comic to them on Halloween night. How much fun is that?
That's brilliant.
But thank you guys again. All the best. Take care, everybody. And I'll be back tomorrow night with Shanth and Jetty. And that's going to be 9 o'clock Eastern. See you guys then. Everyone have a great night and a better tomorrow.
Cheers.